It's time for Windows Weekly. Paul Thurrott is here. Well, actually, he's in Mexico. Richard Campbell's home in British Columbia. We have lots to talk about. Loop has finally shipped. We'll talk about Microsoft Loop. Bill Gates says AI is the biggest technology transformation since the GUI. And finally, seconds come to your Windows clock. It's all coming up next on Windows Weekly.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit. This is Windows Weekly with Paul Thurrott and Richard Campbell, episode 821, recorded Wednesday, March 22nd, 2023. Windows everywhere. This episode of Windows Weekly is brought to you by Miro. Miro is your team's visual platform to connect, collaborate, and create together. Tap into a way to map processes, systems, and plans with a whole team. Get your first 3 boards for free to start creating your best work yet at Miro.com/podcast. And by Collide. Collide is a device trust solution that ensures that if a device isn't secure, it can't access your apps. It's zero trust for Okta. Visit collide.com/WW and book a demo today. And by CacheFly. CacheFly is the only CDN built for throughput, delivering rich media content up to 10 times faster than traditional delivery methods and 30% faster than other major CDNs. Learn how you can get your first month free at cachefly.com. It's time for Windows Weekly, the show we cover the latest news from Microsoft, who is these days the leader in technology. The big. It's just like the 90s. I'm going to do that
the whole show.
All over again.
So I was telling Richard before the show, I'm sorry, we're walking down the street in Mexico, and this truck drives by, and the truck's like this big, and it's carrying this thing that's like the size of the Hindenburg. It's just trash. And I looked at my wife and I said, only in Mexico. And now I can't stop doing it. I'm sorry.
You are home, aren't you, Richard
I'm
Campbell?
back home again, yeah. Back in the studio.
Let me put you back in Coquitlam instead of in Wales. Are you home for a while or?
Yeah, long enough that I think we'll probably go up to the Coast Place. So then I'll be in Madeira Park, and you'll have views of the ocean while we're talking.
It's so funny. Everybody in Canada seems to have a lake house or a coast place. It's what are we doing wrong down here, Paul?
Leo, we don't have enough time to discuss that topic, but I'll just throw out a couple of loose ideas.
Paul Thurrott is Thurrott.com. He's in Mexico. What am I talking about? You have your Mexican place.
There you go.
Right.
So jealous.
Well, I'm selling my American place, if that helps.
It's gone, or it's in escrow yet?
It will be gone in about a week. Yeah.
Great. Thurrott.com, THURROTT.com, LanePub.com for his books. Richard Campbell's at Run As Radio. They are your genial hosts for this episode of What's New in Chat GPT. I'm sorry, Bing Chat.
Excuse me. Around these parts, we call it Bing Chat, buddy.
Bing Chat.
M365 Copilot.
Ooh.
That's right.
Actually, people were saying you should do an AI show. I think increasingly this is it.
Yeah.
Right here, kids.
Well, yeah. Well, okay. But I assume on the Google show, they're talking about this a lot. This will come up with Apple.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be, AI is going to be big in many different places.
Yeah, it's a technology, right? It's going to be everywhere. It's odd to have Microsoft leading, though.
I know.
Or at least
it's unfamiliar. It's unfamiliar.
Well, and Google, finally released their Bard in preview yesterday. And
well, they call it BARF.
Barf.
Yeah, it's fine.
Google
it's fine.
Barf. But really, there's
Google
actually something even more exciting in the news. I saw a little tease last week that something exciting was coming. And it's finally here. We've been talking about this for, it seems like a year. Loop.
It's been more than a year, Leo.
Wow.
It's been a long time.
Can I sign up today?
So, yes. If you have a Microsoft account, you should be able to just get right in.
Oh, yay.
It's
and
a preview still.
It does look, I'm just looking at it. Looks a little bit like Notion.
So you appreciate my tweet of today, which says, Redmond, start your photocopiers. because this thing doesn't look a little like Notion. It's actually kind of disgusting how much it looks like.
They really made no attempt, in fact, to...
No, it's bald-faced. And, I have to say, I have a little bit of a problem with that. And I don't just mean ethically, although absolutely ethically. And I'm curious, actually, Richard, what you think about this. It's not a theory, but this idea. That Microsoft has several decades of productivity apps and services experience. They have billions of people who use Microsoft Office, are familiar with Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and or Outlook, OneNote, whatever. And this is a new way of doing things. This is a new way of doing things, just like Teams is a new way of doing things. This new style of chat-based collaboration in that case, and meetings and all that stuff. So rather than make this product something familiar to Microsoft people, they have made it not just familiar, but identical to Notion. And I should say, because we should mention, there are dozens and dozens of Notion ripoffs out in the world.
Sure.
City and many others that look and work exactly like Notion as well. But this is Microsoft, right? And so what do I mean by that? So one of the odd things moving for me from, like, say, Word to Notion is I type.
Wow.
And I want to make...
They even duplicated the little box on the left that you click. What the hell?
Thank you. That's my point. We're going to get to that. So hold on one second.
Okay, sorry.
So one of the no, that's what I mean. It's not a little bit like
it's a
Notion.
direct copy.
Like, yeah. It's a photocopy.
Yeah.
So when you're typing text in Word and you say, well, I want this thing that I'm typing to be a heading, there's a keyboard shortcut for that.
Right.
Or you can use, most people probably use the toolbar there or whatever, the ribbon. I use keyboard shortcuts.
What's the keyboard shortcut? Is it slash?
No, it's Control-Alt-1 for heading 1, Control-Alt-2 for heading 2.
Oh, okay. That's a little different.
No, that doesn't work in there. Don't do it there. That my point is, it doesn't. So the way it works in Notion is you actually have to think ahead of time to do it. You can apply a style after the fact. It's difficult. You have to click that little box you were just talking about. But for the most part, when I'm doing the notes, I keep saying like today, I can't stop this. When I'm doing the notes, I will think, okay, this is going to be heading, and I type /H2. That's how you do it in Notion. You do it proactively. And then you type your heading and you move on, and the next thing you type is text. It's fine. You can go back using that little box. It looks like a domino, and you click it, and it says turn into, and then you can, so it's multiple headings. And there's no keyboard shortcut for this, right? Which is my problem. I like to keep my hands on the keyboard. So when you move to Microsoft Loop now, there is no version of what I just said for Microsoft Word in Loop. The way you do it is the way you do it in Notion. And I mean exactly the same way. You type a slash, you get a choice of headings and what other options. It's a weird way to optimize a tool. Maybe you know, Richard, when they made the original version of Teams, was it literally designed so that if you were coming from Slack, it would be the quickest possible transition?
I mean,
remember?
It was pretty close. They had their own elements as well. But it's interesting that all of these things are just front ends to SharePoint.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. So just another SharePoint view in a way.
This is the man behind the curtain.
Yeah, is still SharePoint.
Still SharePoint. Yeah. Which is this is the white whale of Microsoft. Let's make a friendly front end to SharePoint that actually works for everybody.
Yeah, they would really like that.
And I mean, I don't know how much time they've actually spent copying Notion so much as this is a very common visual metaphor these days.
Okay.
Right. These set of symbols are pretty standard and so forth. If the alt keys surprise me, how close it is remarkable. It's just a question of, I mean, I think Notion is a great product. Is it that big that they even know its name?
I know. Well, I'm looking at this and I'm saying they know more than its name. I think they know how it was designed, how it was written.
The point being that Teams only came into being when Microsoft failed to buy Slack. Like they knew they needed a conversational engine. They needed that capability. And so they tried to buy it first. And when they weren't able to buy it, then they had to make it.
Right.
Yep. And the big success of Teams, by the way, is that they vastly exceeded the capabilities of Slack and turned it into their most successful platform in forever. I can't even remember. I'm not even sure what to point to. especially in the productivity space. Since the original bundling of products into something called Office, maybe it's been a long time.
Yeah, well, to try and displace Outlook as the sovereign app, like the sort of first place you go at the beginning of your workday, not a trivial problem. Like
no,
that's
and not
a hard
something
thing
that
to pull
happens overnight. Yeah,
Mhm.
but this parallel is perfect, because when you look at Teams to Outlook, and this notion that these things are going to coexist for a while, eventually the old people are going to die off, and Teams moves forward, right? This is to, I would say, Office, the rest of Office, as Teams is to Outlook, right? It's this modern content creation tool with real-time collaboration. And, it's not, we're not going to round robin Word docs through Outlook anymore. We're going to do the stuff in here. And there's also that connection to the past. You can also bring these components into other Microsoft 365 apps.
This is the conversation I had with Stephen Rose on Run As a year ago when they were first talking about Loop, with this, let's go meet the workers where they are.
Yes.
And the scenario he painted was, I have a salesperson who's used to having a spreadsheet emailed to them each day with the current product pricing and so forth. And now that spreadsheet is auto-populated from SharePoint data, so you don't have to re-email it to him. You can open the same one each time, and it's a live document. It just immediately populates. Now we could go look at that in SharePoint through Teams. Like, there was lots of ways to look at that same set of data, but if it makes him happy that it's a Excel spreadsheet sitting in Outlook, fine. We'll meet you where you are.
This is also how you kind of mix and match the old and the new. One of the disconnects with Teams and Outlook is that people who are stuck in their ways with Outlook are stuck in their ways with Outlook. But this is an interesting way to bridge the past and the new, right? That you can say, look, you're still going to use a Word doc, but now there's going to be a loop component in it, that's always updated.
They clearly took their own advice. This is the template gallery, Bad Idea Brainstorm. And number one in the bad idea is create an app identical to competitors. We can learn from the competition's strength.
Oh my God.
Use their weaknesses and build our own strategy.
You picture a bunch of bros high-fiving themselves at their intelligence over that little bit of humor. And
we did it.
Are you going to the yacht afterwards? I mean, like, seriously, guys, it's sad.
So how soon are we moving to this?
As soon as possible, Leo. That's the thing. So
we're losing. We should tell people
you're ready
now,
to run some SharePoint in your life.
Right now, we're using something that looks similar, which is Notion, to do the show rundown. And there's really no reason we shouldn't use Loop for this, right?
Right. Well, then there are good reasons to use Loop, right? So we're already paying for Microsoft 365, so we're going to have no limits on sharing and different types of content.
You have to pay for Notion to get some of those features. Yeah.
Yeah. And I am absolutely not against paying for tools that I use. Please do not take it that way. But I'm already paying for this big hairball called Microsoft 365 that offers a lot of value. This is going to be another big part of the value for me. Whereas for me personally, Teams is not something I like or use on purpose or need. It's something I have to use for work or whatever, but I don't like it. This type of product is something I do use. I use it in my personal life. My wife and I have Notion notebooks, whatever they're called. I don't know what they're called, but we share things together this way as well. Everything we're doing around our apartment here in Mexico, the home sale, is all through Notion. And but we also pay for Microsoft 365, and this is kind of an unfettered Microsoft ecosystem centric version of Notion. So
now I noticed, I tried to sign up for the iOS version, and you have to have a business account, Microsoft 365, and your administrator has to enable it. Right. So that's not the case on the web.
That's right. Yeah. So let's actually talk about that availability a little bit. So there are 3 versions of the app that are available today: web, and then the 2 mobile apps. The web version is open to everybody. So if you have a Microsoft account, you can get in. If you have what we'll call it's called a Microsoft Work or School account, a commercial account, your administrator has to go through some fairly complicated steps, by the way, to allow that in the organization to some level, and then to allow certain people in, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, I believe, I don't know on the Android side if that's the same. I haven't even tried it yet, because I was looking at it the other day and I couldn't get into anything because it was too early. But yeah, it's very complicated on the commercial side. There's going to be a Windows native app, which almost certainly, like Teams, will basically be a web app, right? Will be this app, but running locally. So if you want to test this now, the easiest way is to use the web version.
And the web
I wonder if it
version's
won't
great.
just be a part of Teams, right?
Interesting. Make it part of Teams.
Yeah.
Well, we're about to get a Teams 2.0. Like, by all indications, they're moving away from being an Electron app.
Right.
And wouldn't be that much of a stretch to say, hey, the Loop stuff's here as well. Like, my impression of Loop was never that it was an app at all, that it was just another interface over top of SharePoint that poked into a bunch of different places.
This is the interesting thing to me about Loop. You use this, the example of Stephen Rose with the guy with the spreadsheet. And I talked to Brad about this. He has the exact same need where you're talking about Loop in the context of components that will appear inside of other apps or inside Teams or whatever it might be. There are two types. So far, it seems like there are two things you could be excited about. That, or the thing I'm excited about, which is a notion that is in the Microsoft ecosystem. I'm actually in a weird place where I'm interested in this app. One thing is, I haven't tried this yet. It would be interesting to me if I could write in this thing, by which I mean write news articles or book chapters, whatever it is. I could. The trick is going to be the output. The trick is going to be getting the data out in perfectly formatted whatever. Yeah,
which is not what this is built for, right?
No, and that's the thing. So we'll see.
The real question here now is you look at Word, OneNote, and Loop and say, okay, well, how are these things different?
Yeah, it's not the first time in Microsoft's history there's been a lot of overlap.
I feel like Loop is a unique kind of platform. I mean, it's not, you wouldn't want to, unlike Word, you wouldn't want to create a Word documents in it, novel or a short story.
I don't know.
Really?
You know what? I guarantee, I don't. So we all have, in my taskbar right now, I have 4 chat apps. Right. I have Teams, Skype, WhatsApp, and Discord. I also have, by the way, 5 writing apps. Actually, technically 6, but I'm going to leave that last one for later. Word, Typora, Markdown Pad, Notepad, and Notion. Mm-hmm. I mean, for me, from just an efficiency standpoint, where I have to remember how to do things, fewer things, it would be really neat if I could replace a few of those things, right, and put them all in one app, right? And
apparently the one app is SharePoint. I mean, the only sin that OneNote really had.
I need you to stop saying that word because you're really putting a bitter taste inside of this chocolate.
Jeff Teeper standing right behind you, Paul, right now.
Yeah.
No, but actually the beauty of this is you're using SharePoint without knowing it. Isn't it?
Exactly.
That's the best way to use SharePoint.
Yeah. Except for your poor IT guy. Although, admittedly, SharePoint Online is a lot less painful than an on-prem SharePoint.
And isn't the IT guy happy if you're all using SharePoint backends? Isn't that good?
Is an IT guy ever all happy?
No.
Right. The upside to the SharePoint thing, if you're there, as opposed to OneNote. I mean, OneNote I can collaborate with, right? I can share a notebook with you. It's got limits, but the real problem is it's a file somewhere, typically on OneDrive. The reason to have SharePoint on the back end is that you already have the infrastructure for backup and for multiple access and for security privileges and for rights around access to information, tagging, so forth. SharePoint already understands all of that. And why would they try and reduplicate all that in OneNote and other places when they have it in SharePoint?
I think what you just described is the real reason this thing has taken so long to come to market, because the really, for all of the Notion rip-offing occurring here, the real difference between these two products is everything you just said. Yeah. That this infrastructure exists.
It already exists. It is mature.
Yep. Yes. Oh, yes. Yes. Yep. Yeah. This is where they really kind of, the thing we see is the tiny front end part. Yeah. The big part is the
all those back end pieces. Yeah. And that's why, I've felt like OneNote's been an orphan for a while. Mm-hmm. They played with some different versions and so forth. But the biggest thing here was the isolated back end piece, that it was just a file somewhere on OneDrive, largely hidden from you.
I think, this happened to OneNote to some degree, because remember in the beginning, the idea behind OneNote was, don't worry about it, there are no files.
Yeah.
There are always
which is like-
files.
there's always files. It's a lot.
There are always files.
Right. But what was compelling, OneNote was the first tool that Microsoft made where it worked on your phone and it worked on your laptop and it worked on your tablet and it worked on your PC.
I think it literally was the first one, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And way back in those early days, we were collaborating over it where two of us would be in a meeting and we could each contribute to the same document. It's just that it never had, they never improved the back end. Like OneNote should have snapped over top of SharePoint.
They made some really dramatic bad decisions with OneNote that I think have haunted it for a long, long time too.
Yeah, well, it also it bought in heavily to the pen-based tablet thing.
Yes.
And which, both guys who use it think it's great. They really do.
They get together when you're in St. Louis.
Back in, 2005 when Microsoft was really pushing the tablet, I was stuck on a flight with a sales guy who folded it over, got his pen out, said, "Oh, this is so great. Watch this. I'm going to do a sales presentation. I can annotate it. You can see it. It's going to be amazing." That was the one guy, by the way. That was the guy. That was the guy. You found him.
So everyone has read the Steve Jobs biography. It's one of the best sections of the book. The iPad and the iPhone exist solely because some guy from Microsoft ended up at Steve Jobs' birthday party, wouldn't shut up about the tablet PC.
I'll show you.
Steve Jobs went to work on Monday and said, "Listen, we're going to kill this thing immediately. Do what you can." And that's why that all happened. He couldn't stand it.
Yeah.
Anyway. So yes. Anyway, what Richard said earlier at some point in the show, you said something to the tune of, we're going to meet people where they are, basically. Yeah. And to me, this is, I don't believe that Satya Nadella is, it's all, unicorns and rainbows. And I don't mean it like that. But if his time at the top at Microsoft, I think, has a theme, it is that.
Meet people where they are.
Yeah.
And he said it too. The idea that you're not going to try to make that old, incredibly productive salesperson who's done this thing for years and is going to keep doing his thing. You're not going to ask him to change, that he's going to keep doing the thing he's always done, but is going to be tied into the system, is not going to be isolated.
Right. So no, it's perfect because it's not enough to make this thing over on the side that's better in some way than this other thing.
Right.
They've done the integration bit where if you're going to stick with whatever your old-fashioned tools are, great. When are you retiring, by the way, Bob? Oh, sorry. And, the rest of the world can still move forward. And
one day, nobody will be using that spreadsheet.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, it actually isn't an impediment to everybody else.
We should also point out, by the way, that what we're describing, and this came up, I think, when Mary Jo was around, a year and a half ago, this notion of Loop as being the modern 21st century cloud-based version of Olay, right? That of these compound documents,
linking and embedding.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's sort of the internet-based version of that,
right?
In many ways, right?
And that is SharePoint as the document management tool. Right. Yeah. So the bottom line is that all of those different things that you might link and embed into other things all can live in this repository that has all the sophistication you need.
There's no doubt that the Microsoft of the 1990s envisioned some Cairo-based object-oriented file system that would handle all the stuff you just described.
I'm pretty sure that's the road ahead, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the book that Gates wrote.
Right.
Just actually being implemented in I hate to say it, like a pretty compelling way.
Yeah.
Like, for better or worse, this is, it took a while. I don't see anything bad about it. It's easy to make fun of SharePoint, but SharePoint is very sticky.
So easy. So easy.
And the online version of SharePoint, like as an IT person, is so much wildly better.
That was
the customizations have been tamed there.
I was speaking in Haarlem. Speaking of Haarlem, we've talked about Haarlem, the Netherlands, and I was ripping into SharePoint really badly. And the guy leaned into me, the guy next to me, and he said, I think there are actually a lot of people here who do SharePoint in the audience. And I said, how many of you guys are actually in SharePoint? And it was like 90% of the
world. All using it at that time.
It was like a Rodney Dangerfield,
So SharePoint, forgive me my stupidity, SharePoint does have a user-facing interface. What does it look like?
Yeah. Well, it's
OneDrive really for most people.
Yeah.
No, it's OneDrive. They have a feed,
Okay. So it's a file storage system? No, it's more about sharing, I would think, things, right? Documents.
Well, it's file storage permissions.
Yeah.
It's this, years ago.
Gathering stuff as projects. It's
so it's a back end.
Yeah.
But there's a front end that you could use, but that would probably mostly be
for most people
using
the front end. So the front end could be anything. So a lot of people, if you're in an organization and you're working on a project with people, you might be using Word, Excel, PowerPoint, whatever.
Yeah.
The documents you're creating are stored in SharePoint. You're not really thinking about it that way, but you have they've set up a project with permissions and who's in there and who can do things. If you go to the web version of SharePoint, there are social media feeds, both directly in SharePoint and through Yammer. Although I haven't looked at it in a million years, so that's probably.
And now you're speaking to the schism that was SharePoint. Like, is it a web portal or is it a document and project management tool?
I didn't even mention that part of it. So it did also start as a sort of an advanced version of Front Page, right? This way, in an intranet to share information with people in the company.
Well, there were folks that made publicly facing SharePoint sites.
Yes.
I'm not saying it was a good idea, but they really did do it.
And if you have any problems with that, I recommend you contact Todd Clint. I'll give you his email address. He's really into this stuff.
But when SharePoint moved to the cloud to become SharePoint Online, they left a lot of that behind. They cleaned things up. They got away. A lot of the customizations that had been made, didn't move forward. They went very much more JavaScript focused. Like they got rid of a lot of the pain. People over customized SharePoint to the point where it was a trap.
Now, there's always the old school people who, when that was happening, wouldn't move to online because they relied on features that were only in on-prem.
Yep.
I think the features
they built, right?
Yeah.
Like that was the thing.
But, that day passed. And then I think at some point they became functionally equivalent and they were able to move forward with a cleaner code base.
You could create a solution. I mean, and you can go back through the Run-As catalog and you'll see all of these stories about what does it take to migrate to cloud and what's the right way to do that and leaving some of that stuff behind and, getting 80, 90. I did a show once, I think it was Carol Moon, who was moving Microsoft SharePoint sites into the cloud, right? And talking about like 90% of the stuff just went. The 10 that didn't really wasn't gonna. SharePoint was a much harder transition than something like, say, Exchange, right? Which was pretty straightforward, I would imagine, for most people, comparatively. Depending on how you used Exchange. There were folks who used Exchange as their file store, right? Like they kept everything there. And, that was a running gag about, folks that had multi-gigabyte, nearly terabyte mailboxes because it was actually file storage for them.
All based on JET. Yeah. So Leo asks kind of what this thing is. I think that what this thing is, the way it is, the back end for so many front ends. So, again, working the way you want to work. If you're working in Word, you don't really think about you don't really care where things are, but you can get to them. Some people think in terms of file systems, could use literally OneDrive or go to SharePoint and have a OneDrive-like experience where you go into folders and you can see, locations and things. You can do that. And I think those abilities are what makes Loop make sense as a front end, because we really don't right now. We don't have any idea where this thing is stored or what it, but it doesn't.
You're addressing the core problem, which is that an employee makes a Word document.
Yeah.
Where do they put it? Right. And how do you make sure other people can get to it? This was the original, one of the key missions of SharePoint from the very beginning was that management piece of put these things into place where other people can get them, know they exist, and so forth. I mean, it's a credible problem.
It's
the fact that we put all these front ends on it just increases the likelihood that you're going to find that darn document.
We mentioned Outlook as kind of an old-fashioned type tool, and people are round-robining on documents. You get so many different versions. Bob, Mary, everyone, edits a different version of it, and at some point you have to kind of figure out what's the thing. I mean, there are ways through Outlook to do that where it's a SharePoint-based document, and you're all actually editing the same document, right? So we're moving forward, from a functionality and reliability kind of a standpoint.
And you could set that up under the hood when you got into Exchange Online, you could attach a document to an email. It would recognize it as a SharePoint document and replace it as a link.
Yeah, exactly.
So that we'd circumvent that problem.
So why does this exist? Like, if we can do that with Word, like why, or OneNote or whatever it might be, why does this exist? And the reason is when Google came out with Google Docs and started adding real-time collaboration, There was the one thing that was really hard to do with traditional Microsoft Office apps at that time. And Google Docs being new, they obviously lacked functionality. Those things weren't as powerful as the Microsoft tools, but they did have that one thing because they were new. And Microsoft has added those capabilities to classic Office over the years. It's, the reason we don't still use OneNote is because real-time collaboration never worked properly in OneNote. It's the reason we got off of it about a year and a half ago, whenever that was, a year ago. And this is Microsoft's attempt to address that, that in sometimes to do that modern thing, you can't just build on the old thing anymore. At some point, we've reached the conclusion of what we can do on top of this other thing. We want to start out with something that's clean and new and modern, has those capabilities that we need today, built right in from the beginning. And we talked about the not cross-platform, the ability to go back and forth between new and old, which is, I think, what puts us over the top. Right. It's not just something new. A Notion is something new.
Yeah.
But this is something new that integrates with something old that billions of people are using.
It occurs to me, we know Loop has got it nailed because it's almost impossible to explain. That is the measure.
It's the perfect Microsoft product. Yes. It's not a floor wax. It's a floor wax and a dessert top. It's it is. It's a platform, and that's the thing. Because I want to use it like this app, but a lot of organizations and people are going to use it like that platform, where you're working with those components in other places. Teams,
and this is something that an IT person isn't going to dread, because it doesn't add new stuff for me to back up and new accounts to create and new permissions to assign. Right? I mean, all of those things are done. Yep. It's on the existing. Now, I have gone through the list of what it takes to activate it in M365, and that sucks.
Yeah, that but will dread.
It sucks for a day. Right. Where a new platform sucks forever.
Luke, it's like a root canal.
Yes.
Oh, come on.
You'll be happy when it's over.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I look forward to using this. I think it's going to be.
I just love that you're the SharePoint admin. That makes me really happy.
Oh,
no, you're a SharePoint admin. You're a SharePoint admin.
You don't want me to be the SharePoint admin. Trust me.
Yeah. Well,
I've used SharePoint,
personal account,
but I just
Microsoft is the SharePoint admin.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
That's good, actually.
Yeah, if you're a person. I mean, for a consumer Microsoft 365 account.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's exciting. We can all sign up and start playing with it.
All right, guys. I'll catch you up with you guys next week. And
what's your time? Invite me, I guess. I don't know how you would.
Okay. I need to. So I'm flying tomorrow. What I need to do is get home, look at this thing. Figure that out.
Yeah.
So it may not be next week, but what I will say is this year. Probably first half of this year. We'll at least experiment with it first. And
probably keep the old one and start the new one at the same time.
Make sure it is what we think it is. Make sure it works the way we want it to work.
Yeah.
But will you migrate the old shows over?
No. I don't. See, this is the actual. Well, Richard raised this issue with me.
Of course, I did.
Offline. Well, no, it's not just the shows. I like I said earlier, I use Notion for lots of things. So we have active collaborative things that we're doing right now, like I said, around the house, the apartment here, whatever it is, other things going on in our lives. And we can't, I can't put that in it's probably going to work, honey. We got to make sure. So we'll get there. I mean, we'll see.
For me, it's going to be, will this move me off of OneNote? Because I have decades worth of stuff in OneNote.
I do too.
They should have some sort of exploit.
Exploit. It's exploit. It's when you export and exploit. It's an exploit.
Exploit. They should have some way to do that, I'm sure. Yes. Is OneNote also on SharePoint?
Yes.
Okay. So this would be trivial. It's not a hard computer science problem.
We'll see. I'm guessing that's not there today. I think, like we said, I think the reason for the delay is making sure it does integrate with all those backend systems correctly, that you as an organization create this thing, it does the permissions right. We've seen all kinds of examples of that going wrong. GPT just this week had a little screw up where people were seeing other people's histories and their creations. And, so you got to be careful with that stuff, especially in enterprises, right? This is, commercial for Microsoft isn't just big business, right? It's governments, educational institutions. This thing has to work. So we'll see.
Okay.
We'll see.
I did find the SharePoint migration tool for OneNote folders.
In that much, it took him no time at all.
21,000 words of IT policy goodness.
Ask ChatGPT to do it. I bet I could figure that out.
That's right.
This is actually kind of a timely sponsor for all this. Our show today brought to you by Miro. And Miro, it's interesting. Miro is a whiteboard that can be anything you want it to be. And I have to say, if you're a team, if you're working on a product, I'm just logging into our Miro right now. If you are doing anything from meetings to planning to projects, Miro is one online place that everybody on the team, no matter whether they're in the office or at home or hybrid, can participate in, can work with. It's really incredible. A Kanban, a mind map, a retrospective, a flow chart. Actually, the best thing to do, because it's hard to describe because it's so open to be anything you want. When you go to Miro.com/podcast, click the Miroverse button, because this is a collection of templates. I think this is the best way to do it, that Miro users have set up to give you an idea of what you can do with it. Here's somebody's resume. Yeah, you can share on Miro, share to everybody. I wouldn't want to do another Teams or Zoom or meeting without Miro running, not only to capture the ideas, but they've got a timer. They've got icebreakers you could use to get started, brainstorming tools. It's pretty darn amazing. Miro, M-I-R-O. If you and your team are in the situation where you have multiple tools, you're going from tab to tab, you're losing ideas because every context switch, your brain goes, whoop, new page, and it's gone, right, into the ether. You need Miro. Miro is the collaborative visual whiteboard that brings all your great work together no matter where you are, whether you're working from home or in a hybrid workspace. Everything comes together in one place online. Miro's been around for some time, by the way. This is not, you're not putting your life savings into a beta program. Time tested, and of course everybody who uses it is contributing to the overall number of features. It has integrations with every tool you use. We're integrating with Zapier so we can pull in content programmatically from other sources. It's an infinite collaborative whiteboard that gives teams a perpetual space where they can just, drag and drop in insights, videos, pictures, data, spreadsheets, whatever you want. Nothing is lost. Nothing is forgotten. It's all live. It covers pretty much an infinite number of use cases. This is why when I say it's a whiteboard, that's kind of, that doesn't tell you. You can put live reactions there in your meeting. You can have polls, a timer, express yourself in creative ways, bring the whole group together around an idea, wireframes or drawings. You could use a pen tool in Miro to draw right in Miro. It's great for a mood board. I mean, there's nothing you can't do. Miro users report up to 80 hours per user per year saved by streamlining conversations, cutting down meetings. And that doesn't even keep track of all of the ideas that are saved, that are never lost, because it's there. It's all in one place, the whole history. Miro gives your team the chance to stay connected always to real-time information. It gives project managers and product leads a bird's eye view of a whole project. You can zoom in and out, right, to ensure nothing slips through the cracks. I'll tell you what, this is the best way to do it. Go to Miro, MIRO.com/podcast. Your first 3 boards are free. So you can really kind of try it and see. Start working better. Miro, MIRO.com/podcast. We're using it. Micah and I are using it for our show rundowns on Ask the Tech Guys, because we want to put in video questions and emails and, plan everything all out. It's great for that. It's freeform, too, because Micah and I are free spirits, and we like the freeform nature of it. Miro.com/podcast. I think you will be very interested. Hey, why not? 3 boards free. Give it a try today. And don't forget, again, check out the Miroverse. That's the place to go to see what people are doing with Miro. Okay, what do we got here? What's next? Let me check. I don't know where to look now. Windows 11. I've heard of that.
I moved it all to loop while you were talking.
Tell us all what is new in 11.
Yeah.
Anything?
Yesterday, Microsoft released a new build of Windows 11 to the Insider Preview release preview channel, right? So you know that now they have 4 channels, right? Canary, Dev, Beta, and Release Preview. Release Preview, I should probably just read the description, is where you can go to preview fixes and certain key features, plus get optional access to the next version of Windows before it's generally available to the world. That description is kind of inaccurate now because Release Preview is not testing features that will appear in the next version of Windows. The next version of Windows is coming out in October-ish, right? 23H2. But they have these moment things that are happening in the interim. They're also just adding features, right? So these new features are probably going to appear in April or May or June, something like that. And they're not going to come as part of a thing that has a name. It's going to be a cumulative update of some kind. It's just a
You don't think they'll make another moment?
I'm not saying they won't. I'm saying that these features aren't going to wait for that moment.
Right.
Yeah.
Because
so it gets confusing.
I'm not opposed to this idea of just trying stuff in the wild too, as long as you signed up. Like, don't try it on folks who have no idea.
Yeah. So let's talk about the gradient scale on that one. So people are familiar with that last November or December, depending on when you chose to accept the update, Microsoft released what we call the search pill. Right? It wasn't tested in the Insider Preview program at all. It just appeared one day. And if you rely on the search icon in this taskbar, you will know that it lost a feature. It has a regression. You can't mouse over it and get a jump list of all your previous searches like you could and still can with the search icon. So in late February, and then in the second week of March, Microsoft released Moment 2, which has a new search experience. You can choose between the icon, the pill, as we call it, the box, the search box. And we could argue that that's what they should have done from the beginning. But that at least they tested in the Insider Preview program.
Right.
All right. So here's the second level of gradient. So the second is what you're supposed to do if you're, have any kind of knowledge of how these things work is push features through the Insider program in turn. Start with Canary, go to Dev, go to Beta, then go to Release Preview, and then go to Stable.
Seems very logical.
Thank you. So this new Release Preview build has 4 new features in it that have never been tested elsewhere in the Insider program. That's why I believe they're going to appear soon, right? They're in Release Preview. They're not big features for the most part. One of them is something I would call a bug fix, right? None of them are super, super important. So for example, no one ever does this, but if you open your Start menu now and you click on your profile picture, you will see a list of options related to locking the computer, signing out, changing to another profile on the computer if you have more than one profile, and accessing your account settings. Microsoft is going to use that as a space to advertise the fact that you can back up your special folders with OneDrive. Now they're going to start using it as a place for suggestions. So that's something they're testing. Yeah, I know it's like whatever. There's going to be a new Bing chat button in the search box on the taskbar. Apparently that was something they forgot to add a Notion to. So there's going to be another.
And we don't have enough Bing logos yet.
Yeah, exactly. So they're adding another one. If you click on that, instead of just doing a normal search, it will open Microsoft Edge, regardless of your browser choice, and will bring you to the Bing chat experience. So you can enjoy that.
The thing you can accidentally hover over on Edge with the big B and have it happen on every single browser window you currently have open.
Windows 11 has a rich history of accidental UI. The widgets was like that. You could mouse over it by mistake, and then all of a sudden this thing would pop up, and you're like, I didn't mean to do that. They finally fixed or added the feature to get rid of mouse over. But the one that is what I call a bug fix is if you do use the search box and you have customized the Windows 11 color mode. There's a lot of weird language in here because Microsoft doesn't use the same language as the rest of the world when it comes to like dark and light mode and that kind of stuff. But you could have a dark Windows mode where the system is dark, but a light app mode so that the floating windows and the apps are light, right? If you do that today, apparently the search box is hard to see or hard to read. I guess it's like they didn't test it or something. So whenever this thing hits stable, they fix that. That will actually, the search box will now be a lighter color. It will make more sense for this combination of color modes, whatever that is. And then there's something called Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, which is only for work or school accounts. Yep. And if your organization is using one, apparently there are an incredibly long list of new features in that product. I haven't looked at it for more than 2 seconds. I don't really care too much. But if you do sign in with that kind of account, you will see improvements, or at least additions to Microsoft Defender for Endpoint.
I think once again, it's like, why are we putting new security features depending on what account you have exactly?
Please don't get me started. Mm-hmm. I'm already ranting enough to. Yeah. Yes, I got into an argument with a guy who was on the OneCare team for Microsoft back in the day, where I made my original observation that Microsoft charging to fix problems that it creates in Windows doesn't seem ethical to me.
Yeah, it's a bit of a slippery slope.
Yeah, so they're doing that again in a way, and I'm not a fan. But anyway, so there's that. So that's whatever. But at least they're testing them, I guess.
It does feel like they've been experimenting with how to test things, and the experiments continue.
Or whether to test things.
Yeah.
Yes. So I'm going to give them this out, I guess. Yeah. I will say.
I mean, to be clear, everything gets tested. It's just a question of, do you test on your customers?
Which I don't think you should do unless you
ask their permission first.
Yep. So they are at least testing us. These are small features. If they're the type of thing they think they can ship quickly, is it better to put it through the release preview than do nothing at all? Of course, right? Mm-hmm. Is it enough? I don't know. It's better than nothing. So I at least they're doing it. The start button thing, or the search button they did, big problem with that. And it was buggy.
Not just that it messed up all your screenshots.
Yeah, well, there is a personal element to it for sure.
Well, I think it's part of the reason you noticed right away was like, wait,
it's like, come on.
What?
Yeah. Well, actually, so you weren't on the show at the time. What I noticed was that that button appeared on one computer. I said, well, that's interesting. So I went to a different computer and I installed updates and I looked for it. Didn't happen. I went to a different one. I installed updates. I compared the build numbers. They were the same. I'm like, this is very strange. And it was the inconsistency of its application that was another problem. Actually, I was going to call it the biggest problem.
That feels like a feature flag testing model, right? Where it's like, maybe we're going to turn this on for 10%.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I didn't appreciate that. So that was one I decided for the book. I'm not changing any screenshots to address this. I don't feel that this is the final UI, and I was lucky enough to be right on that.
There is no final UI. There is only the next UI.
This is, I didn't intend for this show to be like this.
Neither did I have another for what it's worth. But, those regrets are 20 years in the past now.
Jeez. All right. Well, someday we'll be sitting on a porch reminiscing.
I think this is what we're doing right now, isn't it? Yeah. All we need is a pickle barrel and a checkerboard, and we're set.
While we're complaining about Windows 11, I just wanted to remind everyone, in case you forgot about this little bit of terribleness, if you're in Windows 10 and you go into the apps interface and settings, there's this notion of default apps. It's a kind of a neat thing. You can say, I want this app to be my default viewer for photos, right? I want this app to be my default for email. And you could customize it beyond that. You could go in and specify specific file types that it's going to open, or protocols that it will handle, et cetera, et cetera. It's a nice interface. It's good. So flash forward to Windows 11. And one of the many regressions in Windows 11 is that interface did not exist when it first shipped. There is a default apps interface. It is hilarious. And what you have to do is open an app, list you can see all of the file types and protocols it can handle, and one by one laboriously go through each one and say, I want this app to open it. Now, no one's going to do that. So what you really do is you just open something on your desktop or whatever, right click, open with, and then say, I want to do this all the time with this app. It's tedious. They've just made something that worked really well difficult. Right. The one thing that's changed since the initial release was they did add a default, make this default for web browsers only. And off the top of my head, I want to say it changes HTTP, HTTPS, HTML, HTML, maybe one other thing. It's kind of what people want. But of course, Windows 11 also ignores your choice when it comes to opening things from widgets, from search highlights, et cetera, et cetera. Taskbar-based search as well. So, okay. I challenge anyone in the room, anyone listening to this at home, go and find the original Microsoft blog post explaining how they now have a principled approach to app pinning and app defaults in Windows. I have read articles where people explain Microsoft is going to dramatically improve how default apps work in Windows going forward. That is not true. That is not what this says. They're doing next to nothing. This is not going to fix the big problems with this stuff, i.e. there is no default apps interface for anything but browsers, and they ignore it anyway, right?
Right.
And I don't want to beat this one to death because the language is so obtuse. I think most people who read this won't even understand what it means, for one thing. And I just want to point it out. I almost don't want to spend time on this because it's ludicrous. And we don't have it actually we sort of do. So the next thing that's in this list is we got a dev channel build just today. Mm-hmm. So I haven't had the chance to test it. It just came out. But this is the first build to implement the changes they're describing in that other blog post.
The principled approach.
The principle, just for default apps, not for the app pinning thing.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the idea here is that if you install an app and it wants to pin itself to your taskbar start menu, it should have to ask you, right? Mm-hmm. It should just do it. And okay, that's fine. So that's neat, but that's not here. This is the default app thing, and I don't know what that means. So we'll have to see. We'll have to wait and see what that looks like, or I'll have to wait and see because I don't have access to a dev box here. So that will happen. But here's the big thing that's in this build that I think will excite everybody. There's going to be an option in Windows 11. I don't even know how this wasn't the top story. That will put the seconds in the system clock.
Wow.
Dun,
oh,
dun,
my
dun,
God.
dun.
Hold on, guys. Hold on.
Finally.
Two caveats.
Oh.
Two caveats.
Yes.
Two caveats. This existed in previous versions of Windows. So this is also a regression. But here's the best one. If you display the seconds in your system clock, you will use more power.
Oh. How much more power, Paul? A lot more power?
I don't know.
Can you measure that power?
I don't know.
That's bizarre. Well, it just means the CPU has to wake up every second. But I mean,
so I'm calling for Microsoft to make a dedicated processor specifically designed to display the seconds in the clock so that my GPU and CPU are not overwhelmed.
There you go.
The SPU.
Maybe they're using
the
a
SPU.
GPU. Maybe seconds processing.
Seconds processing unit.
Maybe they're using the GPU. Maybe there's a big graphic rendering penalty.
That's it.
Yeah, they have to redraw the whole
scalar
screen.
compute of seconds.
I'm going to guess. So I'll just look. I'm being critical this whole show. Let's just not stop. Here's my guess. This UI that they're using is so inefficient that it uses more power. The way they used to render the taskbar was this classic Win32 something that has been around forever and always worked great. And they re-implemented it in Windows 11 because everything has to look cute and perfect and like pandas and zebras and stuff. And it's just not capable. It's a Fisher Price thing.
I am so excited to have seconds on my taskbar.
I can't wait. I'm gonna upgrade to the dev channel just to see it.
Mm-hmm. We have a clock. So as you know, I have a clock here that does show seconds. We have a clock on the set in the other studio for Ask the Tech Guys that does not show seconds. And my team is upset. Yes.
Yeah.
Because they said, well, that's our time code.
Of course. Well, you're surrounded by technical people. And I honestly, I believe the real problem is it's different.
Yeah.
I
right?
agree. Yeah.
And if they're really geeky people, it should be a binary clock anyway.
I agree. Actually, I ordered, in response to this, I ordered a 7-color e-ink display, which I'm going to hand program.
I desperately want to see color e-ink.
It's out.
Well, I need it to be out on a Kindle. Right?
Wow. But this is Kindle sized, and I can drive it with a Pi Zero or something like that. I have a Raspberry Pi 3, I think.
So what I want to see is obviously quality, but refresh, page turn type stuff.
Well, that's why the
really
seconds may be a significant battery drain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're not going to put it on that thing, are you? That's going to look terrible.
No, I won't have seconds on that. But I thought I could have other stuff, like club memberships and I don't know, weather forecast and
It also has the benefit of it's not going to have that weird flicker and reflective type things you get with screens.
I think they're getting better and better and better. Oh, you mean on TV? So. Yeah. There's no refresh
compared
rate.
to
there's no refresh rate. Yeah,
effectively no refresh rate.
Yeah. We've solved that in the modern times. Boy, that was a big deal though in Tech TV 20 years ago.
Oh,
we had to do all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, you get that. Yeah, you get that refresh, banner on the screen
thing going. And oh man, the things we did. We actually, because you couldn't do a screen capture for some reason, which we do routinely now all the time. Look, I could do it right now. Oh, very nice. But in the old days, by the way, this is hysterical. Yeah. Thank you, Teku. But in the old days, we actually had to put a camera, had a TV and pointed a camera at it.
That's incredible.
And you couldn't pull a zoom because you'd have horrible moires. You had to get the camera just right so there was no moiraying. Yeah, it's kind of amazing.
Don't move anything.
Don't move anything. It's kind of amazing. Times have changed. Now we don't. I mean, these are all these screens. I guess they're LCDs now, so it's not as big a deal.
Right.
They're not CRTs. I guess if we still had CRTs, maybe.
I bet if you put a CRT, it would.
I mean, you know what is strobing is the Nixie clock behind me has been doing that ever since we
put it in. It's got a little throb,
a little throb, and that's a because the frame rate of the cameras is different than that. Or the refresh rate. Isn't that interesting? Fascinating. Back to Windows.
Yeah. So,
seconds.
Leo will recall last summer, I'll call it. I had this growing body of evidence that there was something wrong with the 12th generation.
I
Intel
still
Core
have
processor.
this. I have it on Linux. It stalls on my 12th.
There's something wrong.
That Dell 15.
When you dock it.
No, I'm not docked. It just pauses.
Well, I experienced it with docking, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's something wrong.
I thought we'd figured it out, but maybe not.
Well, yeah. So here, what we know about this type of thing in general, and I honestly, this only entered it onto my radar because of Microsoft and Surface Gate, when they released Surface Pro 4 and Surface Book 1, and they had all kinds of hot bagging issues and firmware type issues, power management issues. What I learned at that time was that every microprocessor shipped from any manufacturer ships with all kinds of flaws.
Yeah.
And it is the responsibility of the PC maker to fix those flaws through firmware updates. It's not Intel's responsibility. Microsoft was so upset with this was the first time that they were first to market with any generation chipset. They were first. And they were the first to discover the problems, and they had all kinds of problems. They actually stopped supporting certain generation Intel chipsets in a fight with them with Windows 10. As to show them how serious they were about this, and Intel, kept coming back to them and saying, "Guys, this is your problem. You have to fix this."
This is how this is one of the few times you finally have a company large enough to express an opinion to Intel.
Well, because everyone else understands that's how it works. They
also don't have a choice. That's how Intel does things.
I talked on the record and off the record with friends from Lenovo and HP who both told me the same thing because I asked the question. I said, "So."
That's
you guys must
have
had massive problems with this, right? And they're like, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "Well, and they're like, yeah, that's them. They don't know what they're doing. This is they just don't know what they're doing. They're new at this." And no, they never had problems with that. I think it was the 6th gen Skylake, I think. And anyway, flash forward to today, or to yesterday, I guess last year, 12th gen came out, and I started experiencing this issue across multiple machines. USB hubs. Thunderbolt 3 and 4 docks. Same thing. Huge performance issues. It often expressed itself when you had lots of browser tabs open. Didn't matter what browser it was. It didn't matter if it was Chromium or Firefox, by the way. But you see it in other ways. I see it in Microsoft Word. It's a big problem. Anyway, the point is, HP and Lenovo both issued a flurry of firmware updates last year for their various PCs. And they've not confirmed this. This is my theory, but my belief is that they were trying to fix this issue. That's what we were seeing there.
Right.
So flash forward 1 year. I just got my first 13th gen Intel Core based PC. It's very interesting because the difference between this PC and the previous one, because I tested the other one last year. In fact, the other one last year was the first one I ever saw this problem on. Literally, the only difference is the processor. It's the exact same piece, except now it's a 13 out of 12. It has the same number of cores, the same number of each type of cores. Everything else about this PC is 100% exactly the same as the last year's version. It has exactly the same problem.
Interesting.
Yep. So because we're here, this company was nice enough to send me the product here so I could test it. I've already shipped it back via FedEx. That was hilarious getting that done in Spanish, but we did it. And I tested it on a Thunderbolt 4 dock and on a USB-C hub, and I had the same problem. So that's not a lot of evidence. I don't want to proclaim that this problem persists. I will test other PCs this year with 13th gen chipsets, and we'll see. But based on this one thing, my fear is that this problem.
But I mean, but the 12th gen and 13th gen Intel chipsets both use the same chipsets. They both use the 600 and 700 series chipsets. So if it's not the processor, it's the chipset. Switching the processor is not going to change a thing.
And it didn't. So one of the problems I run into with this stuff is, if Lenovo in this case sends me a computer in March and I review it, I usually take a couple of months I should say the product is usually in my house for a couple of months before I have to ship it back. Right. So if they fix this problem in June or August or whatever it is, I don't really see that. What I see are newer machines that have the same chipset, but now it seems to be fixed, right? That kind of thing. Right. It is interesting to me that this particular product had the problem last year. I never got to see if it was fixed in this particular product, right?
And I wonder if it's specific to chipset. Like it could have been 690 for both. Could have been 690 for the 12th and the 13th, and it's addressed with the 790s. Okay. The new machine I built for She Must Be Obeyed, and I built one for me as well, was 13th gen 790 chipset.
Now, we should also differentiate here. You're using a desktop chipset.
Desktop chipsets, yeah.
So it's possible that this problem is only in the mobile chipsets. I've not. Well, maybe once. I think I have had one 12th gen desktop chipset in, but I never put a dock on it, right? Because why would I? It already has all the expansion you need. So, anyway, again, I don't want to present this as it's back, baby. But it probably is, right? I was hoping that this would get
the fact
fixed.
that they were using the same chipsets for 12 and 13 mean it probably was never addressed by the processor at all. Especially when you talk about that particular problem, like Thunderbolt and so forth. Like that's Northbridge stuff. That's not the processor.
Yeah, I should say this does not happen on Qualcomm. Does not happen on AMD. Right, whatever version of Ryzen you're on. Only happens. It does not happen on 11th gen or earlier Intel either.
Yeah, I'm convinced it's the processor or the system on the chip because it's happening in Windows and Linux on this same machine.
Yeah, I think it's in the chipset, not the processor.
Yeah. Okay.
I would agree with that.
I mean, okay. I don't know if Leo heard me earlier, but I want to be really clear. I'm not 100%. This is one computer. So
well, I have one too. So that's two computers.
Yeah. Well, 13. Oh, you have a 13 gen?
No, I have 12th.
Yeah, no, I had a dozen 12th gen. That one was adequately tested.
Oh, you're saying the 13th is only one computer. Yeah,
same problem.
Same problem.
So we'll see. The year is going to go on. I'll have more computers to look at, and we'll see if I have the same problem.
Here's another question then, Paul. That 13th gen unit you had, was it DDR4 or DDR5?
DDR5.
DDR5, because that would be the newer chipset then.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, although DDR5 has been around for a year or two, and I think, I believe that. No, I know that the last one had DDR5 as well.
Okay. Yep. Yeah, and then you wonder, would the DDR4 implementation be better? Like, although again, that's separate from the actual interface stuff that would affect Thunderbolt and so forth.
I have a computer that I leave here just in case, and it happens to be a computer that I use for screenshots for the book, which works out really well for doing that stuff here and whatever. I don't remember what the gen is. It's a 10th or 11th gen Intel, whatever. It's just a basic U-series laptop. It is the most reliable, wonderful workhorse. It got rained on when I was in Mexico a year and a half ago. It has survived that. It continues to. It comes right up. It works on the dock. It's So if all goes south here, I know I will have this thing and I will be able to get work done and be able to do shows and whatever else.
I mean, I like having multiple workstations, and this particular workstation for the streaming stuff. This is an 8th gen.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, it's so good. I changed out all the spinning hardware. Like when I was building a new machine with the 13th gen, I'm like, there's nothing wrong with this. I'm not going to build another one. I'm just going to switch out all the fans. So, which gives it another 4 years, right? Like that's the only thing that's going to fail.
Yeah. I should, now that I'm kind of walking through this, I should also mention these problems, I believe, are exclusive to the P series, which was new with the 12th gen and is carried forward, right? And P series sits between U and H and whatever else they have. It's a 28 watt part as opposed to 5 to 15 for you, and then maybe 3 to 15, whatever that is. And then I think I want to say 54, 56, something like that for age. There's something about it. And I should say the 12th gen was the first where they moved to the hybrid architecture, right? Where they had performant and efficient cores. And it's like when you buy a Volkswagen, don't buy the first gen of anything. They're going to screw a lot of stuff up. Give them a couple of years to, kind of iron out those things. And I think that's what we're seeing, wherever the blame lies, right?
Well, it reminds me of the early hyperthreading models where certain workflows would look like the processor would presume it could go through the lighter weight hyperthreaded line, and then it realized it couldn't, and it would bonk to go back to the primary line.
Or worse, it thought it actually had a multiprocessor CPU or multiple CPUs, and what it really had was threads.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And again, those were solved by firmware. Right? Like you learned at the minimum. I remember in the early days when that first generation hyperthreading came along, you shut off the hyperthreading in BIOS.
Well, I'll tell you where you don't get firmware from, Intel, for the most part. I mean, if you have an Intel NUC or something, obviously they have firmware and they have software updates for hardware. I mean, obviously they do for drivers and so forth, but your firmware for Dell or HP or Lenovo or whatever company comes from them, right? It's not a rebranded Intel thing. It comes from them.
Well, and I hope the guys at Intel that are building out that hardware go beat the snot out of the chipset people. Like they know where they live, right? Like that's one way.
I don't want to excuse it, but it's such a major architectural change that maybe we shouldn't be surprised that something like this happened. In fact, maybe we should be happy this was the only problem because
that they are chasing it around just quietly in the dark. Yeah, like they're not telling us, hey, we know this is there and we're working on it.
I was lucky to notice it. Honestly, if this had happened a couple of years ago, I would have been working on a desktop PC and I would never have docked these things. It just so happened that this happened during a time, the previous year I'd switched to a dock laptop. Yeah. So I started swapping out the laptop and only noticed it on 12 and 13. Now 13, I should say. And but if I was just using it out in the world, I'm not sure I ever would have drawn this. Yeah, I don't think
and here you talked about the other whole issue on this, which is that think about all the different things we expect to just work here. These different combinations of hardware, like the idea that you're going to introduce in new interfaces live to a machine, plugging it into a dock.
This is the miracle of the PC. In the 1990s, I was at a party in San Francisco and I got into an argument with people from Apple who were convinced that they had better engineers than Microsoft. Right. And I said, there's absolutely no chance that's true.
Right.
They said, what are you talking about? And I said, listen, you guys make 5 pieces of hardware. It's easy. Microsoft has to account for like millions and millions of combination of different hardware, plug-in cards and whatever. I said, it's a miracle that Windows works every day. I said, you guys have it easy.
Living in your walled garden, you've got it so easy.
Yeah. What are you talking about?
I feel like if this really were a universal problem, we'd know about it, right? I mean,
this is so this is my problem, right? Exactly.
Yeah, it's a niche problem.
I don't normally follow, I don't read other reviews that much. I certainly don't read reviews before I write my own reviews. But when this started happening, I started paying attention. I said, how is no one noticing this? Mm-hmm. And I think the reason no one notices this is because most reviews are kind of superficial. They bring them in, use them for a couple of days, run benchmarks, and then they use a boilerplate thing to pump out some review. I don't think people actually use the damn things. Not real world, not usually. Yeah. I use these things for at least a month.
Yeah, that's the difference. I agree.
I really do. I'm not trying to be critical of the whole industry or whatever, but I will say, I get overwhelmed by reviews because there's too many to do. And sometimes I have to say, look, I just can't. I'm so far behind. I can't take more of these into my house, And I think other people just have no compunction whatsoever of run the benchmarks. Yeah. Say, this one's 17% faster than last year with some random.
Looks nice. Like the buttons.
Yeah.
Feels good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Send it back.
On.
And then they send it back. And there's no real.
They don't work with it on a day-to-day basis. Yeah.
I mean, the
pandemic
you wouldn't
made it
hard because I couldn't travel.
But I would think end users would be complaining.
Yeah, I mean, they were doing this.
It doesn't happen all the time. Well, see, it's not happening to me with a dock. It's just happening to me.
You know what the ultimate example of this problem was the Note 5. Everyone remembers that this thing exploded, right? Caught on fire. What people don't remember is that reviewers had the device for 1 week. Everyone gave it 5 stars, the best phone ever released. You can't find a negative review of this thing. No one had it long enough to notice this thing didn't work right.
Yeah.
Because they're all tripping over each other to be first.
Yeah.
And that's what this world is. It's not their fault.
Well, and it serves the manufacturer well.
Yes.
The rush to be out quickly means you don't.
And then you can say, look, it's not my fault. They gave us 1 week with it. Everyone else I had to be there with everyone else. That's what everyone's doing. I'm sorry your plane exploded. It's not my fault. But
is
that's
there
a really
anybody
dangerous.
Who, in your opinion, does good, reliable, long-term laptop reviews? Or
I've never seen anyone do any.
Notebook Check seems to really get deep into the weeds with it.
There are sites that are really good for specifications.
Yeah.
GSM Arena, I think it's called, is really good for that.
They're great for specs. Yes. They're not even a review site, really.
There's I hate to. So I think let me see if I can find this one. In the same way that I don't have complaints about specific individuals, right?
We also know there's no money in it because look at DP Review, which did the best camera reviews for 25 years. Amazon bought them, just killed them.
Yeah. I'm trying to find the one person I really like, but it's again, I'm sorry. I don't know. No one leaps out. Do I trust any? I don't. I try not to read reviews. That's the thing. Like I don't want to be influenced.
You need to keep your head clear. Yeah, I understand that.
I would assume the bigger publications, the PC Mags, PC World, those guys are probably okay. Even at I don't know, like even mainstream publications, I feel like it's kids now. It's younger people. They put the intern types on it because it's exciting to get a free product, for a little while and show it off and write it. And to me, it's like, yeah, okay, but I want to make sure this thing works. And plus,
I mean, I would also argue not every laptop deserves a long-term review.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Like you also got to make this assess of, is this a laptop someone's going to keep for a good long time?
I like to focus on what I would call premium business class computers because they tend to last longer. Obviously high quality. They tend to have less crapware and stupid stuff going on. If you buy a consumer device, it doesn't matter what the company is. My God, the amount of cleaning you have to do to get the amount of pop-ups and, oh my God, did you know you have to start paying for McAfee? I just opened the thing. How was my subscription not valid for some amount of time?
I built out a daughter's machine with a fresh copy of Win 11 Consumer Edition.
Right.
I was horrified.
It's just Windows. Right. What I often write in my reviews is, in addition to the crap provided by Windows 11 Home, because it does ship with crap.
Well, and it's seizure inducing. Like it literally spazzed out at you. It's just like, no, click me. No, click here.
All right. I'm gonna sort of read this. I don't mean Lenovo makes high quality computers. That they put this stuff in this particular computer is surprising to me. If you look at the list of stuff in the start menu, you won't see a lot of what looks like crapware. What happens instead is that you're using the computer. I was yelling. I was in the room yelling, and my wife came in and she's like, what are you doing? What is wrong with you? This is what I wrote about that day. So I'm not happy to see McAfee LiveSafe, Amazon start menu. But the incredible number of pop-ups that occurred when I was working was even more alarming. An app called Lenovo Welcome tried to get me to buy Premium Care Plus support for $75.90, install 4 more crapware apps, pimp a Dropbox promotion, and manage my games using something called Legion Arena, despite the fact that this is not a gaming laptop. Then Lenovo Smart Key popped up so I could get quick access to Lenovo applications and services and add a superfluous new floating toolbar to my desktop. Then Lenovo Vantage popped up to help me maintain my PC and proactively fix any issues for just $29.99 per year. Then it popped up again and offered me theft protection. And then it popped up again to activate something called Smart Lock for $49.99 per year. And then it popped up again to see if I wanted to extend my warranty coverage with something called sealed battery warranty. I bet if you bought everything, it'd be more than you spent for the laptop. I just got the damn thing. Yeah. Could I use it for a day? Was this a ThinkPad? Just out of curiosity. No, it was a Yoga. I think This thing starts at $1,500.
No, I know. I had a Yoga.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
this is
hundreds of dollars worth of stuff they threw at you, right?
Yeah. Now, I want to be clear. I have great respect for Lenovo's products, especially ThinkPad line, but Yoga, those two, I would say. Their premium stuff is fantastic. And this is out of character. I have not seen this before. But PC makers are under a lot of pressure to make money on per unit, and it's hard in the PC space. It's a low margin business. And man, they have gone down a dark path. I have never seen anything like what I just described. These are things I want to be clear. I was working, and they popped up to interrupt me,
right,
with dollar signs. What?
Generally speaking, when you pay for a product, stop interrupting me from what I wanted to do with the product. Like that's rule number one.
Yeah.
Shifting my focus, like I'm mid typing and you've popped something, so I'm now typing to that.
Well, by the way,
never correct.
Microsoft Word and Teams both do exactly what you just described right now. They both do it.
Yeah.
Multiple times I've been in a meeting on Teams and something has popped up, and first it was Excel. I don't remember the other one. Say, hey, did you know that you could share an Excel spreadsheet with your work buddies? Blah blah blah. Did you know I'm in the middle of a freaking meeting? You idiot! Like what are you doing? I'm literally in a meeting. And the other one is Word pops up these things like, hey, you could get this thing on mobile. Click here to get the QR code, dude.
Yeah.
No. Or hey, did you know you could use OneDrive and protect blah blah blah? Did you know the document I'm editing right now is saved in, wait for it, OneDrive? Are you kidding me? No, I mean, these things are stupid. Word popped up something to say, hey, just so you know, you can click here to save this document at any time. Thanks. I've been using this product for 30 years. Are you kidding me?
I'm pretty sure I know.
Are you kidding me? Like, that's how dumb this has become. I'm sure their AI is fantastic. Anyway, sorry. There's, or their AI will fix this problem. I don't know.
Well, this is why I use Linux, I'll be honest. Never bothers me for that stuff.
Listen, my psychiatrist loves that I use Windows. And has literally asked me, saying, I don't know if you intend to retire someday, but I recommend you just keep going. I don't see any end to this. In fact,
I've got to put my kids through college.
Yeah, right. I have a boat. I got my eye on a boat.
All right, let's take a little break. So Paul could get. You're coming home this tomorrow? I'm sorry to hear that. And then what?
Yeah,
I thought you were going to be there forever.
Leo, I want to be here forever. We have kids and cats.
Kids and cats, I know.
Freaking real life.
I know. I hate that. I know.
You got to finish the sale.
So how long are you going to stay in the States, and then when do you go back?
We don't know.
Yeah.
We're going to see. We're going to see.
I get the same effect when I go up the coast, right? Like once you get there, it's
you're
really
like, why am I going home?
leave.
Like, why am I leaving this place?
Yeah.
Well, never retire or take time off, because then you have to go back to work.
Right.
We're going on a 3-week trip to Lisbon and Rome in about a week.
Oh,
lovely.
And, if I don't come back, you'll know why.
Lisbon and Rome and anywhere else? Sorry.
Lots of places. We go to Lisbon for a few days. We get on a boat that goes kind of around Spain and Morocco and Monaco. I love Malta. We're not doing Malta this time, but I love Malta. And then we end up in Rome. We're spend a week in Rome and visit with Padre and see the sights.
Nice.
Yeah, I can't wait. Yeah.
He'll give you a behind-the-scenes tour. That's going to be great.
I think he said he would. He said he would. So I won't be back. Nice knowing you.
Thanks for playing.
So long. But I will be here next week. So you'll be your last chance to abuse me. Then it's out of here.
Right.
No, I'll be back, unfortunately.
Nice.
I won't want to come back, though. I know how you feel. Our show today brought to you by Kolide, Kolide, a device trust solution that fills this little missing hole in zero trust architecture, device compliance. See, if you're an Okta user, for example, Kolide can get your entire fleet to 100% compliance because it fills that hole in a zero trust architecture. Your identity provider only lets known devices log into apps, right? But how do you know that that known device is secure? You don't. Just ask LastPass. one of the 4 DevOps guys who had keys to the kingdom, the LastPass S3 buckets, had his laptop at home, was just working along, logged into the network, I guess, or whatever. I don't know what he did, but he happened to have on that laptop a Plex, version of Plex that hadn't been patched in 3 years, had a known bug. That was all it took for the bad guy to get on the laptop. Then the DevOps guy logs in, supposedly, trusted device, logging in securely to apps. It's zero trust. Yeah, but it wasn't because the device wasn't secure. Many of the devices that are in your fleet, probably just like that, should not be trusted. Maybe they're running on out-of-date OS versions. They've got unencrypted credentials in their download folder. Their browsers are not up to date. Or maybe they're running Plex from 3 years ago. If a device isn't compliant or isn't running the Collide agent, because that's what happens, you put the Collide agent on all these devices, you can't get in. You can't access the organization's SaaS apps or the other resources. The device user can't log into your company's cloud apps, your S3 buckets, until they fix the problem on their end. And this is the best part. They fix the problem on their end. So it's not going to overwhelm your IT team. Collide explains what's wrong, says, hey, before you can get in, you got to fix this, dude. An example, a device employee doesn't have an up-to-date browser. That's always a recipe for disaster, right? Tries to log in with Okta. Okta says, well, you're verified, but I'm not going to let you log in because Collide says you have an out-of-date browser, and here's how to fix it. And that's the beauty, because using end-user remediation can drive your fleet to 100% compliance without, overwhelming the IT team. Plus, users aren't the enemy anymore trying to get by with things. They're an ally. You explain to them what's wrong, what needs to be fixed, and why. Suddenly they're educated, and your life is much better. Without Collide, IT teams really have no way to solve these compliance issues or stop insecure devices from logging in. With Collide, you can set and enforce compliance across your entire fleet, and it's completely cross-platform, Mac, Windows, and Linux. Honestly, LastPass have been using this. Just imagine, the difference, the reputational damage. Collide is unique in that it makes device compliance part of the whole authentication process. So when a user logs in with Okta, Collide alerts them to compliance issues and prevents them, if they're insecure, from logging in. It's security you can feel good about because Collide puts transparency and respect for users at the center of their product. To sum it up, Collide's method means fewer support tickets, less frustration. Most importantly, 100% fleet compliance. Visit KOLIDE, collide.com/WW, okay? Collide.com/WW to learn more, to book a demo. It's just obvious this is the right way to do it. And just think, the risk you face. Collide.com/WW. We thank him so much for supporting Windows Weekly, and you support us, of course, when you go to that address. So make sure you don't just go to collide.com. I know you could. You know you could. But if you add the /WW, it makes all the difference to us. All right. Back to the loop template. If only.
Let me tell you something else I can't stand.
I'm excited that we've got AI down as the third.
We're making progress.
Yeah, it's not going to stay
after a month of it being number one.
It's not going to stay there.
It's going. No, okay, hold on. We can. None of this deserves a lot of attention, but I think it all deserves to be noted, right? So, the AI. This is what we're. This is like our new pandemic. It's like all there is.
But this is a good thing. Do you hate this, or you're tired of the subject, or you think
it's a good thing?
You think it's snake oil?
No. It's real.
It's so much more fun to talk about than NFTs.
Thank you.
Thank God we don't have to talk about that anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But this isn't. And that's the question I always am asking everybody: is this like that, or? Is this the next VR metaverse thing, or is it real?
Bill Gates described it as the next GUI, right? Mm-hmm. And whatever one thinks of Bill Gates, I certainly have my opinions. I would say this is worth reading. He certainly has had his influence over the industry, and
And he rarely talks about technology. What's normally what you'd find on Gates Notes is stuff about vaccines.
That's right.
And
that alone is that's right. And so my write up about this was very short, and I tried to focus mostly on the tech stuff, specifically how it impacts Microsoft. And his original article is worth reading because he talks about, he's been involved with the OpenAI guys, and he talks about some of the things. He says, come back and tell me when it can do this. And they came back a month or two later, and he's like, yikes. And his basic premise here is, I've only seen two transformative things happen in our industry, and one was the GUI. And the other
he talks about Charles Simonyi showing him the GUI in 1980. Wow.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah, Mr. Hungarian notation, right?
Yeah, right.
So I was talking about this with my wife this morning because she's the only one I know here, and she
and she speaks English. Yes,
and she speaks English. So the way I described this was, the internet was such an enormous thing, and it gave you access to all the information of the world. If you think about 5 years before you were online in that fashion, you wanted to know something simple, something that was historic, like who was the 37th president or, whatever, 17th president. You could go find an encyclopedia and look that up. If you wanted to find out something about a very specific part for a car and whether it was reliable, we get into weird areas where most knowledge was out there, but it was inaccessible. Mm-hmm. So the internet made it accessible. I think that AI is the thing that's going to be the fabric that pulls together all of that information that's out there and makes it useful to you. And it will do it through obvious methods like, productivity tools that we're familiar with, all these AI-based image creation utilities everyone's so excited about. And I think there's going to be inobvious things, but I think it's going to permeate basically everything in the same way that the internet did.
I think it's a little odd that Bill's comparing it to GUIs, which is a user interface revolution. I think you maybe compare it more to the internet or something like that, right?
Yeah, that's been one of the...
But it is an interface because it is a way to communicate with the machine. Referencing Road Ahead again, he talked about the smart agent.
That's right.
Right. This may be the first manifestation of the smart agent.
And this,
I think you and I are both cynical for the same reason. We're on the climb of the hype cycle right now, and we know it's a hype cycle.
I also feel like this is the whatever number of stages of grief. It's like you have to cope with this thing over time, and you kind of shift. I don't mean you. One kind of shifts where they stand on it and how they perceive it and what they think it's going to do to the world. And it's important to remember that there are ethical issues here. There are pros and cons. Mm-hmm. There are very real world issues around jobs, where some people's jobs are going to get are going to get easier. Some people are going to lose their jobs, and it's, there's a lot here. And of course, a lot of it doesn't have anything to do with Windows or Microsoft, of course.
But we're still on the way up to the peak of inflated expectations.
Yeah. I'll just say until about 2 months ago, Microsoft would pop out some nonsense claim about AI. They would say something like, it now with AI powered, whatever, spell check. It's like, whatever. Now everyone is making this claim, which makes it hard to understand what's truly good and whatever. Actually, by the way, to give my wife some credit, you guys both know she's incredibly intelligent, but I made that case like I did about the internet. And I said, it's kind of like the internet, except now it's giving us the ability to understand all that data that we have. And she goes, yeah, but wait until quantum computing gets involved. It was like, okay, that's pretty good. That's the, then we just hit the singularity, I guess. I don't know.
That's a different hype cycle for a different set of problems.
Yep. And I hope to be long retired before we have to deal with that. Based on the last time I was briefed on it.
I pay attention to it, but it's a supercomputing problem space. Yeah. It's not a common user interface. Most people will never touch a quantum computer.
Are you suggesting that the iPhone 17 won't have a chipset in it that enables quantum computing? Come on.
I would love that might be true. I just see,
It's brave of you. I'm getting out of the prediction business because
I
could
never. Oh my God, it's impossible.
I could have never seen where we are today. Just when GitHub Copilot started, there was a lot of mockery about it. now developers are like saying $50 a month for this. Wow, this is great. I can fire 5 developers. Stable Diffusion.
There's the job angle right there. Exactly.
Yeah. When DALL-E first came out, it was like, yeah, those are pretty terrible. Now Midjourney version 5, indistinguishable for photography. In fact, there are people making a living selling stock photography that they generate in Midjourney. It's. I think things are happening in a way that I think we're unpredictable, or sounded like sci-fi.
It has accelerated. Yeah, that's exactly right. GitHub announced Copilot last year, sometime probably mid-year, and it was met with skepticism. Like, I'm sorry, are you scraping the web and then providing Stack Overflow
That's what it
answers?
Looked like. It was cut and paste from GitHub public repositories.
Right. Well, let's take a look at the next gen, Leo, because they just announced something called Copilot X, because I guess we're back to an X again.
It does voice. It does. I mean, it's kind of amazing.
By the way, Copilot is 2 years old. It came out in 2021.
Oh, is it 2 years? Okay, I'm sorry. Excuse me.
Wow.
So Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code will include an integrated chat GPT-like chat experience right in the code editor. It will recognize the code, any type of code you're writing, display any displayed error messages, provide in-depth analysis and explanation of what the code blocks are supposed to do. It will generate unit tests. It will propose bug fixes.
I think generating unit tests is a really interesting, for instance, use of this, because nobody wants to write unit tests. And when they do, they lie, and they're not complete, and they're, like, well, see, I got a test. But if ChatGPT does it, I think that's really interesting. Or Copilot, which is the branded ChatGPT.
You guys use GitHub, I assume, to some degree, right? So one of the things you're supposed to do with a pull request is write descriptions of what you're doing.
This is fascinating. It's writing pull requests.
It's going to pull request document now for you.
And I bet it'll do a great job. This is the kind of thing it's good at.
I mean, the main thing it does is at least gets you past the blank screen syndrome. Right?
Exactly.
It does remind you of all the things you've done because it's parsed the code. You'll probably clean up the copy a bit, I hope.
Maybe.
It will probably be more thorough. So one of the problems I have is you stare at that and you think, I do what I do in comments in code, which is just state the obvious.
Right.
Made an improvement to the for loop.
Not so good. Yeah.
Useless.
Useless. But it'll know the difference. And it's, it solves the hallucination problem too, because I mean, the kind of general use of Bing for a search is risky because it could tell you you're dead, for instance.
Yeah. Well, or something you don't know is not true, which is actually the bigger problem.
Yeah, and you believe. But this, because it's operating, whenever it's doing a summarization or it's doing a new pull request, it's pulling from facts that are on the page. I'm going to presume it's not making stuff up at that point. And
so I won't go through every single item I have in this list of like AI that has occurred since we last talked, but what you just said.
This has been 1 week.
I know,
it feels like a year. 1 week.
So Opera, right, obviously makes a web browser. They're adding more. They actually have some AI stuff already. So they're adding ChatGPT to the sidebar, which I think is in browser, right, which is what Microsoft is doing with Bing and Edge. But they're also adding AI prompts. And this is very, very interesting. This is something that appears up in the address bar. So it will do such things as you're reading something complex and you don't understand it. It will shorten or just explain it to you. You can learn more about the topic that you're looking at. You can generate a tweet based on the text you're looking at. It's all kind of from the address bar, right? So it interprets, it summarizes, and it helps you learn and explore more right directly in the browser. And I got to say, for all of the kind of nonsense around AI, that sounds useful to me. Like this is an actual productivity tool.
TLDR generators.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes things are just too long. I want to get to the point. What are they trying to say here?
Yeah. Can it do a change log? That would be fascinating too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, just think of all the things that are really grunt work.
Oh my God, yes. Every once in a while, like I'll publish a book update and I have to figure out what I did.
Well, you hire somebody, I imagine, I know many authors to do an index.
Oh my God, indexes. Geez. Yes, thank you. Index.ai, Perfect.
We spent a lot of money on transcripts for just a handful of shows Whisper AI now can do it on your desktop, and it does a pretty credible job. It's got a little ways to go, but at this point, that's probably next week. I mean,
next week it's probably, dude. You
tomorrow.
Just said it's going to happen before we're done.
It's incredible. I mean, it's mind-boggling. Bing is now generating images.
Right.
And I think
everyone's doing images.
Yeah, but these are good. This is good.
Everyone's doing images.
These are good. Yeah.
So I will put the image at the top of the document we have in Notion here is from Adobe, right? So Adobe has an interesting approach that I think is going to resonate with content creators, especially the professional content creators, right, who pay for the Adobe suite of apps and all that stuff. The idea here is that they're going to generate AI based on your description, like a lot of tools do, but the competitive edge, so to speak, is that this stuff is all legally safe to use and ethically sound because it's created within they're not grabbing copyright. Their learning models are not just grabbing everything that's out in the world, no matter who made it and whatever the rights are. They're grabbing stuff that they know they have the rights to, and you have the rights to as an Adobe customer because you're licensing their products.
This is all under Creative Cloud for Adobe.
It's not just a Creative Cloud, but yes, it's a Document Cloud, Experience Cloud, and Adobe Express. And I've only heard of 2 of those, but yeah. So Creative Cloud, professional, Adobe Express for the rest of us is how I think of it. And then the Document.
So what's a smart angle for them to take?
Yeah, right? But it might be a very short-term angle because the courts have yet to rule on all of these illustrators who are suing. Getty Images is suing. Yeah, but the courts, and I've heard legal experts say the courts are not going to. This is going to end up being transformative fair use. The courts are going to rule. Too bad. What? Tough luck.
I think you just explained how Microsoft made the Loop AI, Loop UI. They used AI, and Notion was the learning model.
So if the courts come back and say, you know what, this suits have no merit, and I think there's a good chance, then Adobe's done something unnecessary. It's like, go ahead, steal all the images.
So there's so imagine you have a copyrighted set of images, right? There, you cannot use these for commercial use without paying for them. And then there's some series of steps, and then you arrive at some image out here that looks nothing like any of those things. Like how far away does it have to be from a copyrighted work?
Yeah,
right.
And this Andy Warhol case, the Supreme Court's ruling on right now is going to be germane in that. That's all about fair use, and it's mildly transformed from the original.
So I told you, I used I think it was DALL-E to make Frida Kahlo style oil painting of Mexico City to create a logo for our YouTube channel.
Right.
And then I'm nervous that this thing was stolen somehow. I cropped pieces of it and I did a reverse image search to see is this somewhere out there? Is this a thing? Right. And I couldn't find it.
No, it's transformative. And so here's, I think, what legal people are saying, the arguments I've read. Every artist bases their art on previous art. Right?
To some degree.
You don't learn in a vacuum. So the really interesting case is the Getty case because you do see Getty watermarks, yet, well, sort of, right? Kind of mangle the watermarks.
And Getty has has always been incredibly aggressive.
But they may lose this case. It's very risky. Because if they lose it, stock photo libraries and libraries like Getty are suddenly in a lot of trouble.
Sure.
And I think it's fair to say, look, it looks like Kahlo because it was trained on Kahlo-like images, but that's not Kahlo.
Kahlo never painted a picture of Mexico City,
right?
Actually,
right.
To my knowledge,
it's. I don't think you can say Kahlo or any other artist just because it's my style. Where'd you get your style from? It was not generated in a vacuum. So we'll see.
Everyone stands on the backs of greatness, and when you are a writer, an artist, or whatever you are,
you copy first.
We have influences, as I would say. But we
first 10 years of any creator, it's all copies. Then you refine.
You have your own thing,
style, but it's derivative from all of that work.
Yeah,
so
that's fair.
Now Adobe's probably smart because their business is with creators, so to do something that's pro-creator is probably a smart thing to do. But I can guarantee you, if these court cases are lost by all the artists, everybody's going to go back to.
But Adobe also becomes a talking point for the court. It is possible to make a copyright-free version of this.
Yeah.
Right? But if you don't need
the argument,
to,
it's impossible not to. Yeah. As long as you massively expand the concept of fair use, then you don't need to. The point being, the argument, there's no way around this is moot because Adobe showed there is a way around.
What we're really saying is, does fair use still make sense in its current form in this new environment?
Mm-hmm.
It may be like so many other things, maybe this needs to evolve to account for what's happening in technology.
Yeah. Sure. As it usually does, right? Copyright was not all that interesting until we had the printing press in the first place.
Right. There you go. Yeah, good point.
I'm interested to see how this goes. I would be surprised if they expanded fair use that much.
No, I don't think they're going to either. but we'll see. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. And the fact is, like, because Adobe does show an alternative, the real trade here is the Adobe stuff any good? Given the limited training set that it has, can it make the things you want?
Oh, I'm sure it can, but maybe not as good as Midjourney. And certainly it can't do a Frida Kahlo style picture of Mexico City because
actually that's what's at the top.
Is that from
that's Adobe? Yeah.
Oh, well, that's interesting. But you gave it the Frida Kahlo prompt?
Yeah, I gave it exactly the prompt I gave to DALL-E. So
is it as good as?
It's completely different. So the ones from DALL-E, and I used one of those for, like I said, for that logo, which I prefer, are much more impressionistic, I guess, less realistic. This one looks like it almost looks like a painting of a real thing, a real place, even though there's no place like
and you can see the brushstrokes. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's good. It's more detailed, I would say, than the other ones. And I did a set there.
Adobe
I have a
is saying
total of 8.
This came from licensed material.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And how much was it?
Now, because, well, it's free right now. It's in beta. So you have to be part of one of their paid service plan, like Adobe Creative Cloud or whatever. You can see the logo, the little watermark in the corner.
At the bottom it says Firefly.
Well, it also says you can't use this for commercial use, right? So
not for commercial use.
We're just having, because it's not out yet. This is just a preview. So I got into the preview. I was just curious, like I'm interested in all of these things. I often feed them the same prompt because it's kind of a good way to test these things against each other. I mean, I feel like this satisfies my request, and I should say there were 7 other of these, right, that I created, that it created, and they're all roughly the same style. It's okay, yeah, it's fine. I don't know that I would have used this in the background of a logo like I wanted to, but. I also like they have more options about aspect ratio and things like that, which
so people may use this not because they have to, but because they'll feel better about it. I'm sure you do.
Well, yeah. Well, yeah. You don't want someone to come back. The last thing you want is an ugly email from a lawyer that said, "Hey, nice logo there."
Well, that's a good reason.
On your stupid free. Yeah, exactly. This YouTube channel that you make no money from. It looks like you've had X number of views, so that's that many violations, and you owe us $11,000.
Well, whatever. It would be prudent to wait for commercial use until these cases, and there are a number of them, are decided.
So I don't know if you've
might be a few
met
years.
the world, but I don't think anyone's waiting. This is the
not
problem.
Been a lot of waiting lately.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah.
Anyhow, we don't have to go through the list. I just quickly will mention Google did launch Bard, so if you have a Google account. You might want to go check that out, see how it compares.
You have to apply. I still haven't been accepted. I haven't pulled any strings.
Opera, I don't use Opera, the browser, but it would be worth looking at just to look at the AI prompts and the Chat GPT stuff that's built into the sidebar now. There's a lot going on. So if you are one of those Bing chatbot enthusiasts, like we said, you can generate images now from text. So that's cool. And I believe that that's broadly available. I think that, there was a wait list on that. I think it's just kind of out there. I still notice I can pretty much access it with Edge and not elsewhere. So I don't know if that's going to be a thing forever, but your best results, at least my best results, have been with Edge. So, and I wouldn't use it otherwise. I'd flush that thing right down the toilet if I could. But anyway, if you want to look at Bing, you got to do that.
Very interesting. We live in interesting times, don't we?
Mm-hmm. We sure do. Mm-hmm. That's nice, because it's. It was kind of a lull after the pandemic, and now it's interesting again.
Yeah, so, I am seeing more people starting to use the phrase "large language model" and less.
Which is crazy, right? Yeah, just like as if this is just out in the normal, mainstream language.
But it's also that fits with that basic idea that artificial intelligence is what you call something that doesn't work. As soon as it does work, it gets a new name. It becomes vision systems, object recognition, sentiment analysis, large language model.
This is the very beginning of the Gates article. He basically defines AI and then generative. Sorry. What do you call it? AGI, which is what? Artificial
generalized intelligence. The thing
intelligence.
The thing that we don't have.
The thing we don't have. And he thinks we will not have.
Yeah, I think he's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a great book I read called Algorithms Are Not Enough that just gets into how complex a thing you're talking about here. It's like, we're not even close. We're nowhere.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, so that's the quantum computing bridge that we need, to get there.
Jeff Hawkins, the guy who created graffiti, he's a neuroscientist, wrote a very good book on the subject about 15 years ago. His opinion is that the human brain just isn't a von Neumann machine. It's not the same architecture. So a von Neumann machine, which is what all our computers currently are, can't possibly do general intelligence. But that's why he founded Numenta, which is the theory was to create chips that worked in a massively parallel way like the human brain does. Because our brains aren't fast.
They said that Qualcomm chips couldn't emulate x86, and I do that all the time.
I like this is impossible, but if you give me enough money, I'll make it possible.
Exactly.
I don't know if they've solved the thing, but I think his point is probably well taken, that you're trying to duplicate a process that happens in a very different kind of machine.
Yeah.
But which is not to say you can't make it look like the same process is happening.
Well, that's what's happening here.
It looks like it's thinking. Yeah.
Hey, listen, we think dogs understand us. Of course, we're going to believe this baloney.
We're going to take advantage of your anthropomorphization to create a product, right?
Right.
I had someone try to tell me how ChatGPT knew something, and I'm like, ChatGPT knows nothing.
No. Let me see if I can. I don't want to pull. Thomas Friedman today chimed in.
Oh, that was a good op-ed, I thought. What did you think?
It was, but I thought it was good. But he said one thing where I was like, nope. No. What he said, he doesn't get it because he's not. This is not his space. But I'll just paraphrase because I'm not going to be able to find it quickly. But he basically said something like, "I was amazed at what this thing was able to create for me out of or invent or something." And I was like, no, that's not what it's doing. Like you don't understand what's happening. It is amazing that it's able to pull in all this stuff and then present something to you, but don't.
It's not creating. Well, it is creating. I mean,
but no, that's not the right word. I used the wrong word. Someone will find it. But I'm like, and I'm like, oh no, not exactly. You realize that it's kind of a layman's view of what's happening, and that's the problem. People are going to think that these things are authoritative and intelligent.
It is a little overblown to call it our new Promethean moment. I don't know. I don't know if he wrote that headline though. So let's see.
It's probably somewhere in the first third.
Craig Monday's giving him a demonstration.
Monday, right, former Microsoft, right?
Right.
Gives him the demo.
And I realized, let's see. He asked Craig asked ChatGPT 4 to summarize Planet Word and its mission in 400 words.
Says, I was amazed.
Did so like perfectly. Did 200 words in a few seconds. Then it did it in Arabic. Then it did it in ABC Darien verse, which is hysterical. I could barely sleep that night, writes Friedman. To observe an AI system, its software, microchips, and connectivity produce that level of originality in multiple languages.
Originality. There's level of originality. Nope.
Seconds each time.
It's like, no, there's no originality.
Well, there is some. Wait a minute, though. I doubt anybody has ever done an ABCD Aryan version.
It doesn't matter. The point was you were fed these different things.
Well, it's original. Like, it's original.
Okay. Well, all I can do is based on what it was fed. It's just there are only so many notes in the world. You've heard every song eventually, that kind of thing. I mean, it's just okay. So many monkeys with typewriters are going to do Shakespeare or whatever.
I don't know. I don't think it's unfair to say this is
synthesizing data together.
Yeah, but it's the creation is something that's never existed before.
We're humanizing what we're seeing, just like we do with animals, right?
Mm-hmm. We should definitely not.
The dog does the little thing with the eyebrow, and you're like, he knows.
We should not anthropomorphize this, obviously.
That's what we're doing. But we are doing. I mean, it's normal. It's human. It's just, I'm not. It's not. It's normal. It's kind of the problem. Like we're going to make these mistakes.
Yeah. I've heard inside of Microsoft, there's a lecture going around it's encouraging Microsoft people to resist anthropomorphizing the products.
Right.
Right. For exactly that reason. It's like, don't be part of overhyping this.
Right. Well, geez, Microsoft invented the overhype of this.
Oh no,
but
they're PRing the snot out of it, but what they're trying to do is get their people to not promise things beyond what's possible here.
Here I've asked ChatGPT-4 to write a description of SharePoint in ABCD Aryan.
Okay. Well, that would be easier to understand than the English language version, honestly.
Actually, it didn't do it properly, but maybe this isn't Bing Chat. This is ChatGPT-4. I don't know. Astonishingly brilliant. There's an AB. SharePoint caters to diverse enterprises. There's a DE. Facilitating grandiose handling of important jobs. Oh, wow, it is alphabetical order. Knowledgeable, lean, and mighty, the network optimizes productivity, quickly revolutionizing seamless team utilization.
That
versatile
nonsense.
Web
the
pages.
Network optimizes productivity.
Well,
no,
Xenodokial, which I've never even heard of, but it does have an X, yet zippy. Allow businesses to create dynamic environments for enhanced collaboration. That was pretty impressive.
That's pretty good.
It did it in alphabetical. It did it by the alphabet.
But all it did it was just fed a dictionary. It's just. I'm not.
It dropped Xenodokial on it, which is friendly to strangers.
It's Xenodokial, yet zippy.
Sure.
All right. Well, let me see. Let me ask it something else, just to see. I mean, look that's original. That sentence has never been said before in the history of time. I guarantee
Probably shouldn't be said again.
Okay.
So, but it is original. It's a creation, right?
But by that token, every moment of every day is something original.
Yeah, I don't.
Yes.
All right.
Can we just
there's
see the
nothing
magic
special
in
about
the
it being
everyday?
original if everything is
Is it
original.
too much to ask?
Yeah.
I could barely sleep that night. That level of originality in multiple languages in seconds. I would ask it to describe Paul Thurrott in Arabic, but I wouldn't know if it's accurate.
Plus, I don't want to start a jihad here. So, my son, like I keep saying, when he was very young, said they should invent a thing that can answer any question. I said, Mark, you're going to be very excited to know they did invent that thing. But this to me brings that kind of home. It's that, like I said, the internet is all the data, and this thing is the filtering or the combining of that, the making sense of that data.
And I think that's the most interesting part about these large language models is that they could provide an interface for doing the thing that a lot of people struggle with, which is dealing with all of the information available on the internet.
I think that's exactly what this is saying, but I'm not sure.
I would hope that someone will take on the problem of only show me quality information.
Yeah.
One of the problems we have with GitHub Copilot is you can't ask for secure code, or code that respects security principles. Right. And then by that same token, you can't ask for accurate information of the big chat.
Sure. Hey, I want to know the answer to the question, but be truthful.
Yeah.
The Windows Weekly Show is an online radio program that discusses the latest news, updates, and features of the Microsoft Windows operating system. The program is hosted by, I'm sorry, Richard, Leo Laporte, Mary Jo Foley, and Paul Thurrott, who discuss developments, provide their analysis. Oh, I can correct it, right?
Richard, just put a wig on. No one will even notice.
Yeah, that's it. I have to start drinking more beer.
I'm just going to help it.
Oh, there you go. You're feeding the demon. What are you doing?
Well, I'm just trying to be helpful. Thank you for the update. Here is the revised description. There you go. See, it's fixing it. I could see how people would kind of go, wow.
Heck, I'm going to be impressed if it actually takes Mary Jo Foley out and puts me in. That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
it did. And it did it in Arabic first.
Well, we think.
You think.
Right. I don't think any of us read it, so I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is.
Well, let me see. Maybe we can see. L'émission Windows Weekly est une émission de radio et ligne qui traite des dernières actualités, mises à jour et fonctionnalités du système d'exploitation Windows de Microsoft. And by the way, the French version still has Richard Campbell in it.
There you go. Context matters.
But it's Richard Campbell.
There you go.
Richard. Monsieur Richard Campbell.
And we haven't run the token cache out yet.
That's right. I'm still in the same token. Sure. That's right. I don't know. Look, I agree with you, Richard. I don't want to be hornsnoggled, and I don't want to anthropomorphize, and so I won't do either. But it's a pretty impressive thing. Whatever.
Well, and the thing you remember about the hype cycle is eventually we get to the realistic expectation part. Right.
Well, I think we're starting to. I think that's why Copilot, for instance, now is being accepted because it's not working in a vacuum. It's the same reason text to or speech to text with generalized speech isn't as good as it is in a narrower vocabulary. It's very good in medical and law because it's a narrowed field.
Right. And a field largely based on memorization.
Yeah, and that
which
too.
The machine does a good job.
That too.
Right.
Yeah.
When you have exams based on memorization, this stuff kills. When you have
better SAT scores than I do.
Sure, but if you have an exam based on comprehension, it doesn't do so well.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's not comprehending at all. I guess that's the point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Except when we anthropomorphize.
Right.
Or is he?
Time for the Xbox segment. Mr. Paul Thurrott will probably take the lead.
So Phil Spencer told the Financial Times this past week that as soon as Europe passes its Digital Markets Act next year, it's going to open up a mobile game store on iPhone and Android and solve the problem that it has, which is that it's not on mobile. And that's the thing. Aside from how exciting that is, if it happens, the thing we've lost sight of, everyone is so focused on Call of Duty because Sony will not let this not be the conversation, right? That the Activision Blizzard acquisition is primarily about the future of Xbox, which is mobile, right? Which is getting Xbox into the biggest part of the gaming industry, the part it's not in at all, which is mobile. And I think it's important just to kind of put that in perspective. Not that Call of Duty is not expensive, not important rather, but rather that and is obviously about bolstering it, its game studios and so forth. But the notion that Microsoft would pull Call of Duty off its most successful platform is ludicrous. It's always been ludicrous, and this is what Microsoft keeps saying, categorically, objectively, stupid. But the big hole in Microsoft's strategy, and I have to say, is mobile, right? There's a couple of weird things to that. One, they are basically waiting for regulators to kind of fall in line on two different things. One, that the EU will implement this new law that's supposed to come, I think, into effect next May, if I'm not mistaken, because, everything happens super slow. But also that regulators are going to approve this acquisition, which we'll get to in a moment, but that looks increasingly likely, by the way. But you know what? Microsoft isn't completely innocent here. Microsoft has had years to enter the mobile market. If you look across their many studios, I ask yourself, how on earth have they not made mobile versions of some of these games? Many of which would run great on modern iPhones and iPads, which have incredible processors and graphics, and high-end Android phones as well. I hope they're not just relying on regulators to make this happen, or not just relying on the Activision Blizzard acquisition to occur, but this is something maybe Microsoft could have worked on a little harder over the years, right? They've made a couple of Halo light games, but Halo would run fine on mobile. It would run beautifully. So we'll see. So that's
Activision Blizzard making more money off mobile than consoles and PCs combined, right?
Yep.
And it does make a lot of sense for Microsoft to buy it for that purpose because it has been wildly successful.
I could be wrong. I hate to say this out loud, but I feel like they make more money off Call of Duty mobile than they do off of
it's probably
Call
true.
of Duty elsewhere too.
Yeah.
I think so.
Look at
which
Fortnite.
Sounds crazy.
I think Fortnite's a really good example. I'm sure the bulk of the billions they've hauled.
But then let's go to the counter argument. How much money does Sony make on mobile games?
None, almost. And so but that's the thing. These guys are very comfortable in their own little markets, but
but aren't we getting to the point then that Sony's complaint about this acquisition is about trying to delay Microsoft entering the mobile market in a meaningful way?
Yeah, this is literally, we just don't want this to happen.
Right.
We don't want a competitor. We like them as they are now. We
don't want them to go get into a market that we've never been able to get into or never really tried to get into.
And I would add, by the way, cloud streaming to that. They've just kind of failed at that. And so, we'll see. In fact, let us not forget, I don't remember when this was. It might have been pre-pandemic for all I remember, but Sony partnered with Microsoft on a future game streaming service. Remember, they were going to use Azure.
Right. Because they don't have their own cloud. So they've got to use somebody's.
So I don't know. We'll see what happens there. I didn't write this up. I really enjoy Foss Patents as a site. And he has written something really interesting today about the Microsoft acquisition of Activision Blizzard. And his basic point is that this is very increasingly, it's become obvious that this is going to happen. That we've moved into a new phase where it's not just about complaining about it. It's like, well, how are we going to fix this? Like, what do we do to make this go through? And that this is, when you look at what regulators are now talking about, some of the ideas are dumb, for sure. But I think the UK said, well, what if you offered Call of Duty to Sony for more than 10 years? Like 10 years is enough, guys. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Didn't Microsoft point out in 10 years, Sony, you could make your own Call of freaking Duty?
Yeah, exactly. You could just make something. And by the way, Sony has had incredible success with game franchises, including some that are first-person shooters. I mean, there's no reason they couldn't do a military shooter if they wanted to. That's all they want. The point. Richard made the point. This isn't really about Call of Duty. It's really not. It's just keeping Microsoft down. That's what it's about. And
whatever language you can use, that'll work.
Yep. And it's just increasingly is getting strident, I think.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting to see more organizations like Epic coming out on the other side of this going, we think this is a good deal.
By the way, Epic literally, and Tim Sweeney, incredibly critical of Microsoft and their Windows 8 App Store, and the fear that this is somehow was going to take over, for app stores on Windows. And obviously that never happened, but it's interesting to seeing him come around to what Microsoft is trying to do today, because those guys were bitter enemies back at that, about 10 years ago. Today he's singing a completely different tune, which is kind of interesting. And and of course he wants the same thing. He wants to put his game store on iOS and Android as well, of course.
Right. And that's,
of course,
you made an interesting point. Should mobile become the primary platform even for AAA games?
Yep. Yeah, I think so.
That's a really interesting point.
Well, it gets to the point that the primary device for most people is a phone.
Right.
Right. That is the general purpose.
They're powerful enough to do it. And what it really is about numbers, right? This is unit. It's like the number of units.
There are billions of phones and only hundreds of millions of PCs.
Yeah. I mean, and listen,
consoles.
In a future, like imagine a future in which console gaming disappears. Let's just pretend it disappears, right? People are playing games on mobile and they're playing games on PCs. The PC guys are going to be the same jerks they are today. Yeah, but if you want it to run in, blah blah blah, whatever, you have to, we can build a PC that will always be better. And it's like, yeah, you'll always have that.
Yeah, but thousands of dollars and a limited market, and
yep. No, I know, but they'll always have that. Like that will always be yours. That will always be there. It's fine. It's good.
Yeah, you don't take it away.
No, of course not.
In fact, I presume. Well, see, the problem with mobile is iOS dominates mobile, and that means you can't use the Unreal Engine. So you're going to be using Unity. So it's going to hamper your desktop development.
I think desktop is always going to be important, even if it's a tiny share, because
I agree.
Cloud gaming will be based on PC. It will be based on
it means that you can't use, or you won't want to use the same engine for mobile as desktop, and that's a kind of a non-starter for some people, I think.
But I think interfaces are so different, you're going to need to anyway.
You would want to.
The screen's only so big.
Unity,
the interfaces are so limited.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Right.
My building just gave a little shimmy shake.
Well, you are, in fact, on a fault zone, famously.
That's the first time I've experienced that. That was a little weird.
Mexico City has had some pretty horrific earthquakes. I'll tell you what, if we go dark again, I'll send my drone down your way, and maybe it can dig you out. I don't know.
I'm on the 6th floor of a building here. I don't want to have anything bad happen. Anyhow.
No. It's good. Do you think of
anyway,
these little tumblers as releasing the pressure so that you don't have to worry about the big one?
Surprised my wife hasn't come running out of the room. That was interesting. Okay. This building is designed for earthquakes, obviously, but one of the weird things is like if a big enough truck goes by, you get a little side to side. It's kind of like we were on the boat last year, right?
Yeah.
And you'd be asleep, but it was kind of that
shimmy.
weird sashaying back and forth. Yeah. It's a little bit. It was like that, and but this was.
By the way, I started a new chat with Bard, and it retained the correction. It knows that you are now the host of Windows Weekly. Congratulations, Richard Campbell. Even
I feel special.
Even the AI,
the Matrix appreciates your contribution.
It's wild. This is wild. What else is going on in the Xbox?
Netflix. I don't know if anyone's noticed this. They're starting to do games. I keep bringing up this insurtification thing with mobile, especially. I'm not a big fan. You guys will appreciate this. My wife didn't appreciate this when I bored her with it the other day. But there's this thing when you think about apps, wherever they might be. Mobile apps are like Unix programs. So usually, they do a thing. And that's it, And I think that's the normal way. I think that's how we think of apps. You go into an app, you do this thing. You go into this app, you do this other thing. There are exceptions. Microsoft Outlook on mobile obviously has calendar and email and contact, blah, blah, whatever. But I don't like podcasts in music apps. Right. And I don't like games in streaming video apps. This is a company putting their own corporate aims over common sense and over what its users want or need.
This is Netflix trying to survive. Every other streaming service is bound to a studio, right? And in the end, Disney's going to win it all. And so the only way they,
Wow. I guess.
Well, except for one. Okay, but hold on a second. Just to counterpoint that, Netflix to me is the modern version of HBO, meaning that they have their most original content. It's usually pretty high quality. And I like to see that form of competition.
Yes, except that now they're struggling with that, right?
Yeah, I know.
They've made some duds. They figured out that duds are expensive.
Yep.
They're not sure how to do the right thing.
Right. So, it's easy to know how to do the right thing. Don't just say yes to everything. There was a point where if it was original on Netflix, it was going to be good. But once you get burned by that enough times, because there's enough garbage, and it's not just shows, by the way, it's movies too.
Did you watch 1899?
Not yet. It's in my queue.
Okay. Well, and then so 1899 is an interesting show, and I could argue about
time
it.
Travel kind of a thing.
Yeah, it's weirder than that.
Yeah.
And they had a very strong setup at the end of the show for a second season.
Okay.
Which they did not get.
Oh,
Netflix announced they didn't get it. And then it came out that the reason they didn't get it was that the first season didn't have strong enough watch through, that not enough people watched the entire thing to the end.
Interesting. Okay.
And it brought up this whole conversation about how many great series. It's not the first season that was great. Right. They mentioned things like Breaking Bad, right? Where Breaking Bad really only became.
Seinfeld is a great example of that.
Absolutely
horrible when it watched.
And so again, speaking to this whole idea of Netflix isn't necessarily a great producer of shows. They're struggling with that particular issue, and a lot of that knowledge exists in other places.
They just produce the money that pays the producers of the shows.
Right.
I mean, I think it's the same model for Netflix with games as it is with shows, right? They write a check.
Well, okay. I don't mind Netflix doing games. I would like there to be a Netflix games app that I can choose.
It's weird. Have you tried? What do? You go to Netflix?
No, I will never. It's in Netflix. Yeah, it's just it's in the little list of things that you can watch. It's
and what happens?
We make games. I don't know. I've never done it.
It's so weird.
But the barrier to installing another piece of software is so high.
I hear you. I know. I don't know. It's Facebook and Facebook Messenger, right? These are two different things, sort of. They should be two different apps. They're going to be again, apparently.
It's too weird. I agree.
I just don't like, to me, mobile makes sense because it's simple. And part of being simple is that we don't have Outlook style apps on mobile, except that we do have
everything apps.
You got peanut butter in my chocolate.
Yeah. I mean, the Office app is a good example, or I guess it's called the Microsoft 365 app that works. And by the way, Outlook mobile works. I'm sure there are millions of people that use it and love it, and it's fine. I don't know. I think complexity is the problem. And I especially don't like complexity that has to do, like I said, with corporate aims. Hey, did you feel I think we just had an earthquake. It was a truck. She tells me it was a truck.
Yeah.
There you go.
It's easy to confuse.
Well, that went on for a while. I've never felt that before. That was
It's a big truck.
Like an earthquake, only it has a beep when it backs up.
no. Well, we get no. There are stupid big trucks here, but that one went on for a long time.
There's a lot of truck.
Anyway, yeah. Okay.
What else?
Anywho.
What else?
What else? Yes. What else? I mentioned this probably a show or two ago, but based on the timing of the release of games through Xbox and PC Game Pass, I was like, I think this is going to be a month where they have 3 sets of releases, and they confirmed that this month by releasing or announcing MLB The Show 23. We're on version 23. It's coming on March 20th. So it's 2 games. I'm sorry, and also something called Infinite Guitars. So there's 2 more games coming in March. Here we are on the 22nd, and they're announcing 2 more that will pop up by the end of the month. So this has been kind of a big month for Xbox Game Pass across the board. So that's cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, and this isn't such a great deal per se, but it is the Steam Deck's first anniversary. And so Valve is having a sale, and they're 10% off actually until tomorrow. So you got to move quick on that one. Sorry,
yeah.
March 23rd is the end of that.
Hopefully you listen to the stream to it. I saw my first Steam Deck out in the wild, and I have some friends who worked on it.
Yeah.
Steam, so I immediately pinged them from the plane and said, "Hey, I saw a Steam Deck out in the wild."
Was on a plane, right? Because that's where I've seen
on
one
a plane.
too.
That's
Same
where you
thing.
use them, right?
Yep, that's where I saw it too.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's an impressive device. It's substantial. It's not you could kill a small animal.
It's a tray table.
Yeah, it is a tray table.
Yep.
It doesn't unfold like a laptop, but everything but.
Yeah, I played with it for a little while, and I said, I have a Nintendo Switch. I don't need a Steam Deck.
Okay. Yeah, there you go.
The Switch is a much more svelte machine than the Steam Deck.
Oh, yeah.
Steam Deck
and the games are designed for that form factor, and that's the big problem with Steam Deck.
That's my big problem. I can't look at the text from a PC game on a tiny screen. I just could never. I'd have to have, Coke bottle glasses on and be right on top of it.
Yeah, it's not a good experience.
Yeah.
But I guess
we're always comfortable with Nintendo's ability to remake games on a new platform and to just make. It's not just that they have a walled garden; it's that they have like 6 of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, even Portal on the Switch is great.
Video games.
Mm-hmm.
Why not?
Why not?
Hey, we're gonna get Call of Duty on the Switch. Wow. Again, I should say. People forget this, but Call of Duty 3 was on the Wii, and you used the little nunchuck thing to throw the grenades, which I have to say was cool in a way, but it's also hard not to let go of it because
there goes the controller.
You're throwing a grenade. You don't want
your controller to explode.
Yeah. Yep. That worked fine.
Are you ready for the back of the book? I'm ready for the back of the book and some brown liquor. This show brought to you, as it always is, as it has been for more than a decade, by CashFly. We love CashFly. It's our content delivery network. We know, as I think you know, if you have a website or a game or video, the customers aren't going to hang around for your content to load. They will leave within seconds, so don't give them a reason to leave. Dramatically increase your sites and your app's speed over long distances for global audiences with CashFly. With over 3,500 clients in over 80 countries around the world, organizations like Twit consistently use CashFly for scalability, reliability, and unrivaled performance. Some markets are more challenging than others, and content delivery costs can vary drastically. Partner with a CDN that knows what it takes to deliver content fast in global markets and is honest about the costs to get you there. Scale your content delivery in these emerging markets. South and Central America, predicted to be a significant emerging market in gaming and entertainment. Over the next 5 years, CashFly has committed to navigating the complex governmental regulations, tariffs, attitudes to understand how this market operates. And they've been launching POPs down in South and Central America and doing a great job of it. IP traffic in Asia Pacific growing year over year by 25%. Australia is no exception. Part of that, right?
Owing to a lack of early investment in the region, many network operators struggle to cover the entire Australian continent. It's a big place. With a presence in Melbourne, Perth, and Sydney, this isn't a problem for CashFly. India is a market that also can't be ignored. Huge. One of the world's fastest growing consumer economies, mobile content consumption, and many business operations tied to the West. By providing edge-optimized content tailored to the mobile market and dedicated transfer and caching solutions, CashFly has your needs covered in the Indian market. And I can go on and on. We're so happy with CashFly. Reach your audiences anywhere in the world with CashFly's 50-plus locations all over the globe. You'll get ultra-low latency video streaming that delivers video to more than 1 million users concurrently. Lightning-fast gaming, which delivers downloads faster with zero lag, glitches, or outages. Mobile content optimization. If you've got a website, this is amazing. And it automatically does image optimization so that your site will load faster on every possible device. And you'll never pay for service overlap again. You'll get flexible month-to-month billing for as long as you need it. Discounts if you decide, hey, we got it nailed for longer-term contracts. But you get to design your own deal when you switch to CashFly. We know it because we've been using CashFly for more than a decade. And I wouldn't do it any other way. They saved our life. Twit would not exist without CashFly. CashFly has been around building trusted CDN relationships since the turn of the century, since 1999. CashFly continues to hold the track record for high-performing, ultra-reliable content delivery. CashFly, the only CDN built for throughput and delivering rich media content up to 10 times faster than traditional delivery methods and 30% faster than other major CDNs. Learn how you can get your first month free at CashFly.com. That's CashFly. See, I've said it many times. CACHEFLY.com. Thank you, CashFly. I think you can kick things off with your tip of the week.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I like the name of this. I don't know.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, I know that most people think of me as Microsoft Windows, whatever, but honestly, I feel like a lot of my kind of professional life, it's been more around like productivity and efficiency kind of stuff. And I'm fascinated by things that can help me be more productive, right? I am not a fan of meetings. I don't like scheduled events. I don't like alarms, And I was thinking through all this kind of stuff. And over the holidays, I decided I was going to try to go down this inbox zero route because my inbox becomes a source of great stress. And, depending on what it is, I want to make sure I'm dealing with email in some fashion. So if it's an individual writing me, I want to make sure I get back to that person, right? If it's a PR person, something going on in the world with an NDA or something, I want to make sure I'm on top of that. If it's garbage, I want to make sure I deal with that correctly. So my instances of reported phishing and spam email to Google Workspace have gone up approximately 1,400% since January 1st. I keep getting emails about it. I cannot believe how many things you're reporting to us. Why do you keep doing this? But I've been trying to triage email. And I would say inbox zero is not something you set and forget. You have to keep working at it. It's also inbox zero with an asterisk because there's usually 3 to 5 emails sitting in there because I keep things that are pending NDA type, embargo things until those things pass. But I got to say, it's been very successful for me. And in a weird coincidence, I mentioned this to my wife. This was a month or two ago, but she's doing the same thing. And she does something I don't do, which is she actually snoozes emails so that they come back again. I'm like, no, I want that thing to go away. I don't want it to be like a little mole coming up out of the ground or whatever.
I was always careful with being the path of least resistance for certain subjects.
Yeah.
So I've had a 24-hour tickle folder for a long time.
Oh, interesting.
Which is,
okay.
I'm just going to drop that in the 24-hour folder.
Yeah.
And then because you'll probably
Revisit.
answer this before I get there. After 24 hours, if you still don't have an answer, fine,
Yep.
I'll do it. But I don't want to do not put energy into things you don't want more of. Right.
Huh.
And if you're the path of least resistance for something, you're just going to keep getting those.
Right. Yeah. I would have hoped by this point email would have become less important, but in my life, it's incredibly important. And it's the primary way I
you could
communicate
change tools, right? Like it's a question of, are you going to move?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one of the big advantages today too, is that email is very easily searchable. Mm-hmm. I have a rather ridiculous folder structure that I maintain for the documents that I write. But when it comes to email, I don't do any sort of filtering or sorting or anything like that. And if I need to find something, whatever it is, if Leo wrote me an email, I got to find it, or if some PR person did
This
2 years ago.
explains a lot, Paul. I now understand.
Find that. No, email search works great.
Okay. But you have to search. You have to know to search for it.
Yeah.
No, I mean, if I'm literally, it's like I need to find this thing. I can't remember when it was, but I remember maybe the name of the person who sent it or the company. It's very easy to find.
Yeah.
There's no reason to, overthink that stuff. Anyway, it's worked out for me.
Well,
I am not paid by the company. I am just a happy user. It's not a company. It's just the way of doing things. Anyway, I almost forgot. I almost forgot to mention this, which is ridiculous because this is the biggest thing that has consumed me in a long, long time. Last week, I completed Windows Everywhere, the book. It's available now at LeanPub.
Oh, everything, everywhere, all at LeanPub.
All the time.
Yeah.
All at once.
Yeah. Nice.
So
congratulations, friend.
Yeah, thank
well
you.
done. Let me make a note of that.
This book is quite big, and it's going to get bigger because I'm already working on new content for it. But for now, I'm going to kind of let it sit for a little while. It is complete, right? So the neat thing about this book is that unlike the Windows 11 Field Guide, which is ongoing and I keep adding to it, this book, as it stands, is a complete work. It's the history of Windows over 30 years from 1985 to 2015. The second half of that history is considerably bigger than the first half because I was involved with it personally. And so I have stories and internal things I got and whatever. And so there's a lot of pictures and blah, 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 whatever. So
Windows Everywhere, Paul Thurrott. So don't be fooled by the 90% complete thing. That's just silly.
I'm adding content to it. Yeah. Well, so there's a few things that are missing. I want to do like a Microsoft code word list that's from the book. I want to do a terminology list. And I have that new content I'm going to add as well. But it is a complete work, yeah.
And, of course, you get the updates automatically, right? Or free or somehow.
Yep, you get it for free. Yep, that's right. It's about 930-something pages.
Holy moly, you've been working hard.
Yeah, it's
wow. All right. And you set your price, Windows Everywhere, leanpub.com. It's actually leanpub.com/Windows Everywhere if you want to go there directly.
Yep.
And you used, what did you use? Stable Diffusion for the cover?
No, actually, so doing masking doing masking in Photoshop is very difficult, and I do it so infrequently, and I always forget. So every time I have to do it, I look it up online, and I was having a hard time getting it work, and I thought, I wonder if Affinity Photo does this wicked easy. So I did this cover in Affinity Photo, and the background image is a license. It's a Pixabay image. It's freely licensed for commercial use. It is not the Bliss wallpaper.
It sure looks like
it sure does. Yeah.
Well, no, it's not. It's a license free. It's free to use. So it's
smart.
It's like the Bliss wallpaper.
Right.
Yeah. So
nice.
From Windows XP.
Very, very nice. Windows Everywhere, the rise and fall of the most important software platform of all time. And it's available at leanpub.com.
Somebody, by the way, questioned that subtitle. Said, are you kidding me? The most important software platform of all time? I said, sure. So tell me another software platform that had 95+% market share, and we can talk. I mean, I
agree.
I mean, from that perspective, it's not even close.
Yeah. App pick of the week. Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God!
Yes,
Visual Studio Code. That's what you said right here in the show notes.
No, it's in there. Yeah. So here's the thing. When it comes to books, I rely on Rafael Rivera for a lot of the back end stuff because he's just a genius programmer, technical. He's just genius. And so one of the issues with Windows Everywhere is I was having EPUB publishing issues that there was nothing I could do to solve them, and I was also having LeanPub system errors that had nothing. I was positive. I troubleshooted for days. And he figured out in both cases what it was. And it was not something I could fix myself. It was this back-end technical stuff that I don't even understand. So in the process of this, I said to him, one of the challenges with this book is it's like almost 1,000 pages long. And it's too long. And I have to do stuff with the images. I have to reduce the image. I have to, do whatever. And he said, well, you're using Visual Studio Code for this, aren't you? And I said, no. So I use Visual Studio Code for like web dev and for Flutter stuff. I've looked at it in the past for writing, like Markdown type stuff. And by the way, I might be moving in that direction soon. That's a different story. But Visual Studio Code. So when you're like a web dev, one of the things that you do with that is you open a folder. This is a central feature of this product. It opens a folder, and then you can do stuff with the files in the folder. You can create new files. Obviously, you can compile those files. You can do whatever you want. So what you can do, because the book is in GitHub, so you open it in Visual Studio Code, and then you can do a search and replace. So for all the images that were 100%, I don't remember, thousands and thousands of instances. Let me look at the thing to give you the exact number here for this book. The markdown, the number of markdown files that make up this book is 157. Each of which contains from 1 to 15 images, right? So do the math, whatever that is. So they were all 100%. I'm like, this is taking up too much space. I need to make them, what I did in the Windows 11 field guide, make them 75%. You have any idea how long that would take? If I went and opened every one of those files and did that manually? You could do a global search and replace in the folder. Did it in 1 second. It fixed the entire book. The book went from 1,000 pages down to 938 pages in 1 second.
Because
and it's not just that.
Size.
I also did things like correctly formatting image code. There were things like M dashes and smart quotes and whatever else. I bang every one of these things. 1 second. 1 second. The entire book, get everything formatted exactly right. So what I can tell you right now is this book is the cleanest book from a code sense, perhaps that has ever been created. It is absolutely the cleanest book that I have ever created. And it's because of Visual Studio Code, and it's because Raphael recommended that to me.
Good. As has Mr. Campbell more than once, I suspect.
Oh, no. I'm a big believer. It serves me well.
Yeah. It is an incredibly versatile tool. And I'll just mention real quick, you can use it to write in Markdown. And there's a couple of fun. There's a Microsoft Office theme extension you can get to make it look like Word, which is hilarious. There are spell checking and all that kind of stuff. There is an output to HTML, which is critical for me because I need to output clean code to WordPress. So I can use this thing. It has a, what's it called? A command, not a command prompt, but there's a thing. It's like Control-Shift-P brings up this thing, export. It exports the cleanest HTML in the world. It's perfect. This may be turning into the thing I used to write as well. Visual Studio Code is possibly the greatest single application that's ever been written. It's kind of unbelievable. And a large part of it is because of the extensibility model that allows you to.
And the community that's grown up around building those extensions. It's tremendous.
Yes.
And it's Electron. Who would have thought it?
But you know something? This thing is not a big, fat, heavy anything. Yeah. It is very lightweight. I don't know what to tell you. I know. When we were talking about coding challenges some time ago, I was using Visual Studio Code. I never had to leave the environment. You can compile. If you're compiling, if you're using JavaScript, you can just run it. It runs from the internal terminal. It's like you don't never leave. Like it just works. It's rather incredible. I don't know. It's just Visual Studio Code it's
impressive.
It is impressive.
It's great too.
It really is.
Okay, I'm getting nauseous with all this romance. I'm just going to move on here.
Well, listen, we started the show with a bunch of ranting. I wanted to end it on a high note.
I can't come on this show and say Emacs is the second coming. I'm not going to do that, but okay. You wrote your book in Visual Studio Code. Okay, fine.
Hey, don't be a hater, man.
I think your harshing is mellow.
Actually, the fact that VS Code's free and available on every platform is pretty amazing. I think it's
incredible.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Let us get the Run as Radio update from Mr. Richard Campbell right here.
I had a chance to talk to our friend Ned Pyle, who mostly tweets about his dogs these days, but he still works very much in the storage space at Microsoft and a great thinker. He's been the guy leading the campaign to end SMB1, at least in the Windows world, but preferably everywhere because it's so insecure. SMB3 being vastly superior. And we did a show a while back, published today, about SMB over Quick, which is a protocol for doing secure file communications over the internet. So just getting rid of VPN connections or having to store in the cloud. Cloud's great if it works for you. If you want to use Dropbox or OneDrive and so forth, that's awesome. But if you have a file server and you now have work from home folks, you're probably making them VPN in, and that can be problematic for performance, resourcing. It's tough. And so modern versions of SMB with modern Windows Server 2022, you can set up these quick-based file servers. They're really efficient, and they protect things like UNC paths. So if you've got software dependent on a UNC path, like OneDrive's not going to help you. You're stuck. But you can recreate that UNC path with SMB over quick. So
very interesting.
Just a modernization of this is the new way. And an effective way to still provide files if you need to host it yourself.
And a little brown liquor education, please.
Are you ready for the next phase of the story, friend?
Ready.
So, going back to the beginning, we talked about growing barley and malting and milling and mashing. So where we left off was in the mash tun, right? We have now taken the grist and run water through it, and we've made wort, the same stuff you'd make for beer. You've now extracted sugars using warm water, and now it's time to mix the yeast in. We're going to ferment. And so the water extraction process, fairly high temperature, comparatively speaking. We're talking 60 to even as high as 90 degrees centigrade. So that's, 130 to 200 degrees Fahrenheit in the measurements of the oppressors. But yeast can't tolerate that kind of heat. Get with the rest of the world, friends. Celsius is your friend. So yeast is going to consume these sugars and release alcohol and carbon dioxide in the process. So this is where the alcohol comes into the equation. And yeast, the typical yeast that they use is optimized for 34 degrees centigrade. That's what it'll be the most productive. That's about 93 degrees Fahrenheit. Above 35 degrees centigrade, the yeast starts to die. So you don't want to be that hot. So first problem with your worts, you got to cool it down. They have heat exchangers to do this. And then they will immediately introduce the yeast into the wort as it's pumped into the washback. And we'll talk about washbacks in a bit.
As opposed to backwash, which we don't want.
As opposed to backwash, which you don't want near as much. It's interesting to think that we've been making whiskey for hundreds of years, and yet we've only just started. Understanding yeast is relatively new. So when you talk about original whiskeys back pre-1800s, the yeast mostly came from beer. So we'd long ago learned that lambic yeasts available in the air would make alcohol out of grain, malted grain, to be turned into beer. And the process that was used in the pre-1800s for making whiskey is they would stir the wort with larch sticks, branches of the larch tree. Huh. And the yeast would tend to stick to these sticks and survive. So as they moistened it again, stirred again, they'd propagate the yeast while not knowing what yeast was. Oh. Now, the yeast would propagate enough.
But they didn't know why.
Exactly. In fact, they thought the yeast was an unfortunate byproduct, not recognizing it was actually the thing that was making the alcohol. Now, the first scientific evidence that yeast was the part of the process actually comes from Louis Pasteur. So pasteurization, like all of that stuff, it was Louis Pasteur in 1879 who said yeast is why fermentation exists and started identifying strains of yeast. And in fact, shortly after that, we have sort of the base yeast that's used, what they call distiller's yeast, which is Saccharomyces cerevisiae. By the 1930s, there were companies working in Scotland that created a hybrid between cerevisiae and another kind of yeast called Saccharomyces diastaticus. That company would eventually become Diageo. The names actually share. We'll talk about the companies that own distilleries later, because that's a long conversation. And that particular hybrid, what they call DCL-M strain, was so popular that for a period, for 50-something years, up until at least 2003, it was the mandated yeast. This is the yeast that all Scottish distilleries would use, and in fact, many still do, although we now have more modern, more efficient yeasts that are starting to become more popular, like MX and Mari and so forth. The yeast is a living creature. It's a large single cell, and it consumes sugars, and it's kept alive. It's live in a liquid form, and it's typically stored in a liquid form and used steadily. It used to be common for distilleries to produce their own yeast at scale. They don't anymore. There are specialists in all of this. But the concentrated yeast paste, or yeast cream as they call it, is actually mixed with the wort as it's pumped into the washback. And this is a kind of a race.
That was a fairly disgusting sentence that you just issued.
I know. I had a stomach issue the other night that was just like this.
I mixed wort and yeast cream into the washback.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Don't get your wort on my washback.
Yes.
Anyway, okay. Go
now,
ahead.
and then fermentation takes off immediately. Within hours, you have a concentration of alcohol. Now, when I've toured the distilleries and gotten a chance to talk to the folks that run the fermentation, and then because these very, very Scottish people are often difficult to understand, most fermentation runs for days. In fact, and they'll study the weather very closely before they start a fermentation batch because the temperature matters. They don't want to overheat, and they don't want it to be too cold. It's kind of a minimum of 48 hours of fermentation. The average is more like 60 to 75 hours, although some distilleries prefer much longer fermentations, up to over 100 hours. The sort of general rule is that short fermentations gives you more grain flavors, and long fermentations create more complex flavors, as they call it. The fermentation process is rather vigorous. The concentration is high. They have a high specific gravity, and so the yeast is so active. When you see these washbacks in action, and they're 25,000 to 40,000 liters. They're big. Back to the measurements of the pressures, like 9,000 gallons. And the yeast is so active, it almost looks like the liquid is boiling. Like it's that much energy, and there's a lot of carbon dioxide being released. In fact, it's dangerous to get your head over top of a washback because you can literally knock yourself out and fall into the mixture, which you can't swim in because the release of carbon dioxide is so rapid. You will sink to the bottom and be stuck there.
Oh Lord!
So, and they keep lids over these washbacks for that reason, try and keep you safe. It also generates a lot of foam, and so they have a device that sits on top of it that stirs they call it a switcher, to stir the foam to stop it from overflowing the washback. Traditionally, washbacks were made of larch, the same sticks they used to stir in the first place.
Wow.
Wait, did you say larch?
Larch, yes.
Wood, yeah.
I have a larch tree in my
European
front yard.
You should be making whiskey, my friend.
You could be
It
making
is
whiskey.
the ugliest tree on earth.
All the more reason
neither
to,
a pine nor a deciduous. It
There you
is
go.
a mess.
Now, all the more reason to cut it down, slice it into planks, and make a washback from it.
Interesting.
Now, later generations of washbacks use Douglas fir, Oregon pine, New World trees. They're generally looking for tight grain, no knots, long planks. That's because you're making your washbacks quite big. Modern washbacks are made of stainless steel, and there's a lot of conjecture about stainless steel versus wood. The first is the heat problem, because stainless steel radiates heat extremely well, which means it won't overheat and kill the yeast, but it might cool down and slow the fermentation rate down. Wood's much more insulating, but then you do have the battle of you get too warm and start injuring your yeast. You're racing to do this fermentation because there are other things that like the wort. There's other bacteria that want to consume that sugar, and one of the most difficult ones to deal with is lactobacillus, the stuff that makes yogurt. And the lactobacillus bacteria is particularly successful at attacking wort because its byproduct is acidic. So it actually raises the acidity, which cripples yeast. And so you can end up with what they call a sour batch. You sour the wort because lactobacillus has taken the batch, essentially, and it ends up being thrown away. The battle against bacteria is cleaning. And so stainless steel is popular because it's very easy to clean very vigorously, where wood is more difficult to clean. Most distilleries that use wooden washbacks use a high temperature steam, and they will pump very hot steam, pressurized steam into the washback and hold it there for 30 minutes or so, essentially to kill all of the bacteria. There's no evidence that there's flavors of the wood that enter the wort at this time as it's being fermented, just because the wood is reused so much. But there is a discussion about ambient bacteria that do add positive flavors, not lactobacillus. And so lots of distillers have gone back and forth with, when they started removing these wooden washbacks in favor of stainless, that the flavor of their of the washback changed. Typically, when yeast ferment the wort, they only get up to about 7-8% before the alcohol kills the yeast. In the old days, they would filter that as kind of a raw sour beer they called Joe. And certainly it's part of the tasting process to understand like how your fermentation is going, detect a soured washback before you put it into the stills. And so depending on the distillery, you're finding that some distilleries have even new washbacks are being done in wood, not just for traditional purposes, but they believe in the flavors that come from the wood versus stainless steel. And that leads us to today's distillery and a particular version of their whiskey. This is the Ben Nevis distillery. Now, Ben Nevis is located beside Ben Nevis Mountain, the largest mountain in the UK, a very high mountain. And one of the claims to fame for the Ben Nevis distillery is it takes the highest water source in Scotland at about 900 meters. That it takes this very pure spring water to make their whiskey. The location is in the very far Western Highlands, not far from Oban. The very, very Western Highland area is a little bit different than a lot of the other Highland areas. Highland's quite large. It's on the site of Fort William. Fort William, that original fort, was built in the 1600s to manage the Scots, as the English said. It was literally named after William of Orange after the 1688 revolution. So just a reminder, there's been people living in that part of the world for a very long time, but that's where the Ben Nevis distillery is. The original distillery was built by the MacDonald family, famously Long John MacDonald, a 6'4" tall man in the 1800s. Was part of the original distillery. They built a second in 1878, although it only ran for about 30 years before it was shut down. The original distillery continued to function under the MacDonald family until 1941. In 1941, it was sold to a Joseph Hobbs. And Joseph Hobbs is a Canadian who grew up in British Columbia, who was born in the UK but grew up in British Columbia, lots of Scots in BC. But became a millionaire by bootlegging whiskey to Americans at Prohibition. The Hobbs brothers owned a shipping firm that shipped between the UK and the US and Canada. And when Prohibition came on, they learned to take whiskey. Famously, they bought thousands of cases of Teacher's Highland Cream and then ran it in their ships around to California, where people weren't expecting whiskey to land. And the ship would lay offshore, and then speedboats would come and pick up the case of whiskeys and bring it into the local bootleggers. And when Prohibition finally ended, this enterprise was going to wind down, they took that money and they started buying distilleries. And that's originally they've created a firm called the Associated Scottish Distillers and bought a lot of different distilleries, including Brookladdock. And then it wasn't until that was in the 30s, so after Prohibition was over, it wasn't until 41 that the Ben Nevis distillery got bought. Hobbs shut down the distillery for 14 years. He essentially rebuilt it. And this is one of the reasons I wanted to mention Ben Nevis, because in 1955, when he reopened, he had made concrete washbacks. It was heresy, and yet Hobbs is remembered as a fighter of the small Scottish producer, but he used concrete washbacks and a coffee still. And we'll talk about stills in a later episode because distillation is a complicated process, but a coffee still is a very unusual still for Scottish whiskey. It doesn't make coffee the drink. It's a style of still that does continuous distillation versus batch distillation. He also stuck to making it with his own yeast for a long time. He would blend brewers and distillers yeast, which was, again, considered heresy, and yet he did it for 30 years. The distillery shut down again in 78 and was sold back to the McDonald family in 81. They took a couple of years to refit it, removing the Nikkei still, and then ultimately shut down again in 86. In 1989, it was sold to the Nikkei company. This is Asahi. This is a Japanese firm that owns a number of Japanese distilleries, and we can talk about Japanese whiskey sometime later. It's a huge story. But this is the only Scottish distillery owned by Nikkei. And in fact, more than half of all the whiskey that Ben Nevis makes goes into blends for Nikkei's blends. When Nikkei took it over, and the funny thing is that Nikkei being a Japanese distillery, the Japanese distilleries use a lot of coffee stills, but for the Scottish distillery, they remove the coffee still and they remove the concrete washbacks and put in 6 stainless steel washbacks and 2 Oregon pine washbacks. So they use both as part of their process to make their particular whiskeys. The Ben Nevis 10 that I refer to, it's a little bit hard to come by. But if you go looking for Ben Nevis whiskeys, you'll have a tough time. They do a lot of blending. There is their own blend called the Dew of Ben Nevis is lovely and inexpensive. It's very much like a Johnny Walker red or Johnny Walker black. But the 10 is a classic, is a reference version of what they call West Highland whiskeys. It's aged in bourbon casks. And they talk about coffee and chocolate and toffee notes. It's got a lot of color, which comes from the bourbon barrels. They almost talk about a little salty texture to it because it's on the Western Highlands, which gets a lot more ocean exposure. But it's a nice whiskey, and it's, like I said, a classic Highland. It's not so rich as the Spays with sherries and ports. It's much more the lighter flavor. And unfortunately, this particular moment, the Ben Nevis Distillery website is in maintenance.
Yeah,
new site
went
coming.
to it. Yeah. Oh well.
And so I linked to one of the popular sellers of Scottish whiskies for the Ben Nevis 10. There are many other editions. Even this 10, depending on its edition, like they say, the 2019 version of the 10 is better than the 2021. But they're all great to drink if you can find them. I would typically only drink a Ben Nevis while I was in Scotland, where it's easier to come by.
And that, my friends, is the story of yeast cream and wort mash in a nutshell.
Next week on animal husbandry, we'll take a look.
Wow.
It does have a... Wow.
So there's fermentation for you.
Yeah.
Now you've got an 8% alcohol solution that you could now add some hops and make it into beer, or we can fire it through a couple of stills and make it into whiskey. So next up will be distillation.
It's funny because we spent a lot of time when we were down in Oaxaca with Mike and Amira Elgin visiting mezcal distilleries, and it's a much simpler process.
Yeah.
They don't, it's like once they got alcohol, they go, okay, that's it, we're done.
Close enough. Yep, we're done.
Close enough. Yeah. It's pretty amazing, actually.
That's funny.
And the crazy part is, as whiskeys go, Scottish whiskey is very coherent. You should see how they make Irish whiskey. It can be madness.
Yeah. And a lot of it's not Irish, which is another problem entirely.
Well, their system's a little looser. The Scots are very proud of their whiskey making, and there's very much a culture of the way that they make things. Right. The earlier days are obviously more complicated, but since the early stage of the 1900s, it's been very consistent product, and it's fun to talk about.
It sure is, and I thank you for the lesson. Richard Campbell is the host of Run As Radio and .NET Rocks. We'll find it all at runasradio.com. Joins us here every Wednesday, as does Mr. Paul Thurrott, the author of Windows Everywhere.
Hooray!
Now available at leanpub.com along with the field guide to Windows 10. Of course, Paul's website is thurrott.com. And they join us every week, no matter where in the world they are, to talk about Microsoft.
I think I'm going to be in a new apartment next week.
Wow.
I think.
Someday your life will get simpler, I hope.
Well, that's what we're doing.
That's what you're working
trying.
on. Simplification
Trying.
sometimes is temporarily complicated. We do Windows Weekly every Wednesday, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 1800 UTC. Actually, it's now 1900 UTC. Just to visit the live.twit.tv web page. That'll have audio and video streams. You can pick one, listen or watch to your heart's content. While you're doing that, chat with us in our open to the public IRC, irc.twit.tv, or be a mensch or a wench. I don't know what the female mensch is, but whatever that might be, and join Club Twit. That way you can be in the Discord, chat in there, the clubhouse, where the booze runs freely and the hot dogs are free. Actually, no, there's no food or drink, but there is a bunch of conviviality. You provide your own food and drink. We do provide you with ad-free versions of all the shows, plus shows we don't put out in public, like Paul Thurrott's Hands on Windows. There's Hands on Mac. There's a Linux show. There's all sorts of good stuff. There's club only, because when a show's brand new, we start it in the club and then launch it out into the public. That's what happened with This Week in Space. We just relaunched, I'm so happy, Scott Wilkinson's Home Theater Geeks, and that's thanks to you, members of Club Twit. Be part of the good guys. Join Club Twit, twit.tv/club, $7 a month, $84 for a full year. And it helps us keep the lights on, and it helps you get some great content and gives you the good feeling that you're supporting us. Twit.tv/Club Twit. We thank you very much. After the fact, you can still get the show at ad-supported at twit.tv/WW. There's a even more ad-supported YouTube channel dedicated, but it is
now with more ads.
Now with more ads. Some of them we don't do. That's actually a good way to share it, though, with people. If there's a clip of, you want to say, hey, you know what a warp mash is? I do. Here, listen. You could just clip that out at YouTube. That's a very easy way to do that. Best way to get the show, though, with no effort on your part, is subscribe in your favorite podcast player. Add that to your list of subscribed and auto-downloaded podcasts, and you'll always have a Windows Weekly. When you're feeling lost and alone, you can tune us in, and we'll talk to you as if we care. Thank you for joining us. We will see you next time. Paul, Richard, have a great week. See you next time on Windows Weekly. Bye-bye. I say that in jest. Of course we care. Of course we care. Don't think we don't care. Listeners of this program get an ad-free version if they're members of Club Twit. $7 a month gives you ad-free versions of all of our shows, plus membership in the Club Twit Discord, a great clubhouse for Twit listeners. And finally, the Twit Plus feed with shows like Stacy's Book Club, The Untitled Linux Show, The Giz Fizz, and more. Go to twit.tv/clubtwit. And thanks for your support.